Good evening and welcome to the June 24th, 2024 City Council Roundtable meeting. I am Mayor Ross, and tonight's meeting is brought to you live using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. Tonight's recording will be posted on the city's YouTube channel. City Clerk Dean, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Benson.
Here.
Councilmember Watton.
Here.
Councilmember Holloway.
Here.
Councilmember Washington. In the hall. Stepped out.
Here an abstention.
Councilmember Cotton. Here. Councilmember Christensen. Here. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Mayor Ross.
I am here. Thank you, Dean Clerk. Dean. Okay, next is approval of the agenda. Council may have a motion to approve the agenda, which is for the roundtable. And you have kind of an outline in front of you. And it's regarding affordable housing.
So move.
Second. Been moved by Councilor Watton, second by Councilor Christensen. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And the agenda is approved. So this evening's special business is affordable housing. We will invite Community Development Director Artecha will please introduce the item. And Councilor Watton will also help lead the discussion on this.
Good evening, council members. Emily Arteche, Community Development Director, and Councilmember Watton. I will just briefly state that the city's been working on this topic for the majority of my career here at the city of Snoqualmie, starting with the early formation of a task force back in the fall of 2022. And this project dovetails nicely with responding to the county and state's desire to create more affordable housing. It certainly is a topic that the city can use to help demonstrate our earnestness to move forward with addressing these concerns. Today, Councilmember Watton has provided an outline. It was the outline that we used at the last CD committee meeting to discuss. There were no changes recommended. I think that some of the most important topics on this agenda are whether or not the city really wants to use the identified parcel to pursue an RFP or an RFQ. We can go into details about what the differences of those two mean. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have, obviously Councilmember Watton that'd like to add some more feedback.
Thank you. Well, it's an exciting evening because we've been working on this for almost 9 years since our first affordable housing meetings. And tonight we're going to take a look at what we're nicknaming 9033. It's the property that's down below Habitat on Snoqualmie Parkway. And I'll bring that up in a moment here, if I may. Give me a moment, and then we'll get into the discussion. And I want to have full discussion of everybody on the council and that we move through. Thank you. Moment here. Sure. This is actually a presentation that goes back to December, and it's just kind of a placeholder to remind everybody where we're at in the process. So this is kind of a collaboration coming from, let me see here. Collaboration out of the task force for Snoqualmie Valley on affordable housing. And my system will catch up with me. I promise it will. So some of the considerations were the availability of city-owned parcels, the access to public transportation, the walkability, existing infrastructure, development timeline, and addressing the missing middle housing element. This is the parcel. If we look at the map of the city of Snoqualmie on the Parkway, and we'll dive into that parcel a little more closely. So this is 9033. It's city owned. It's about 14 acres and nearly 1 acre buildable on it. And if you can see in the map on the left-hand side, that is Gravenstein that feeds into this parcel. What you can't see is there is a bit of an elevation drop, and it's about 35 feet from the top of the parcel down. So you can kind of envision that when we're talking about a 35 or 40-foot height limit, it pretty much kind of gets embedded in the slope of this parcel.
Is
So-
that how that's calculated? Is it,
Councilmember Benson?
is that how the height is calculated? Is it from like street level?
From the elevation where it starts. So it's baseline here outside,
Right, but if there's a 35-foot drop from street level,
right?
is the height limit? An engineer. Is the height
Not
limit
above, not above. It's not like you could build 60 or
Right, okay,
70
right,
feet.
right.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. It is surrounded by both sensitive areas, wetlands down below, but the acre that we are considering in this parcel is free of any encumbrances to environmental impact from that. We did have initially an engineer, 2 engineers and an architect look at this and said, you know, we do this all the time in affordable housing. We end up with properties that are a little more challenging. The benefit of this one is it slopes the correct direction where the water runs downhill and goes into a pond down below. So the other consideration we talked about, and that's the Affordable Housing Fund. And we looked at this back in December, and then Mr. Boutte gave us an update today or this last week on where the fund is. And that is in the document, the second document that you have in your disclosures there. So where are we at on the timeline? Well, we talked about the city-owned potential parcels. Today, we're at that council action of developing whether it's going to be an RFP, a request for a proposal, or an RFQ, a request for qualifications. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, and I'll have Director Arteche talk about the differences in that. And so we went through, there's a number of strategies that we may consider, everything, tiny homes, micro apartments, and this is overall, this is kind of a housing strategy for the entire valley. But you have a menu of different things that you can choose from in whatever we do and whatever parcel we're looking at. So we have co-op apartments, which are a little bit difficult to finance because there are not many banks that will do that. Land trust agreement, we know that as Habitat, but there's another organization that does this type of work. So it's not limited, but in a trust agreement, trust arrangement, the city could own the property and simply lease the property under a 99-year lease or a 55-year lease to the developer. Another one is to use the reserve funds, and that's what we were referring to. We've got, at the end of this year, we will have $1.7 million set aside in our affordable housing fund. And one of the thoughts there is we can incentivize the builder by saying, okay, if you build this number of units at 50%, we give you X dollars. It could be $50,000 per unit. And that's one way we could deploy the 1.7 million. We could say, you know, at 60%, we're going to give you $30,000 per unit, and at 80%, $15,000, but we're going to have to defer that over for legal and for our finance department to fine tune that. Another option is we could offer the developer
Councillor Christensen?
I just had a question, Councilmember Watson. Are you aware of any local cities that are using their reserve funds to incentivize by making these payments in order to increase housing stock?
No.
Okay.
I'm not. Good question.
Thank you.
But I guess it's up to us how we deploy that money, and we can use it as an incentive. Or we can simply say, here it is, we'll do, X dollars of pre-planning for you. But that's a good question. Offer an allowance for utility street development, same sort of idea. And then here's the other thing is that if they build at 80% AMI or less, they may be eligible for the multifamily tax exemption, but that has to be an action taken by the council. And we did that with the mill site. Blended development, we might even entertain the idea that developer comes in, and as long as they meet those targeted areas, that the other could be market rate. Have other communities done that? Not necessarily with their own property, but it is a way to help encourage builders to come in. And so some of these may be somewhat cutting edge because they haven't been practiced. It's how aggressive are we going to be? And then the other consideration, are we developing these for single individuals, whether they're families or seniors? Here's the other thing to keep in mind. Some of those may have a bigger impact on the schools. And whatever we do in affordable housing, there are no impact fees collected for schools. So we kind of have to be mindful of that. So I just wanted to frame this up for our discussion. One of the other things is who's out there who could be potentially invited. And Director Arteche has a list of 50 national builders that we would send this offer of an RFP or RFQ out to. And this is a number of the local ones that we're aware of and that we've reached out to and have had some feedback on it. But here's the thing that I've heard, and this is only anecdotal, and that is we won't consider anything until there's an RFP. Now, they didn't say until there's an RFQ. That was just simply being offered up by 2 or 3 of the developers, and it was also offered up by the other experts, including architects and engineers. We'll take a look at it after you have something concrete, and that's why we're here tonight. So, creation of an RFP, some of the things that we're going to need to determine, and whether it's an RFP or RFQ is probably the same thing. What are our expectations? What's the maximum height? Affordability? Do we want 1-bedroom family units, senior units? Do we want to allow a percentage of market rate? And the city contributions, the timeline considerations, the funding sources, possibly city-owned, retained, with a lease back option that gives us a little more control over how those are managed. Having an on-site manager may be important. It might help us mitigate some of the challenges we've seen in the past when there isn't on-site management. Do we do these as rentals? Do we do these as potential home ownership? Which is typically done through a land trust arrangement. And then what are the amenities that we want? What are the things that we think that are important, wraparound services, or just an outdoor gathering space, or places for kids to play? Those are all kind of things that we need to give some consideration to. And with that, I thought I had added on. But with that, let me go to this sheet that says the agenda. And if it's okay with our chair, what I'd like to do is open up for discussion. Whomever raises their hand first gets to go, and then we're just going to do a round robin so everybody gets a chance to chime in. Is that
I also think it's good if I call on them. That way, whoever's on they will hear them on audio and be able to recognize who it was that was speaking about it.
Okay.
Good.
Either way. Okay. I'll introduce the topic. I won't go through the bullet points. You have the bullet points in front of you. They're just there to help spur some discussion. So the first one is this the right property? 9033. And is this the right approach? Is this something that you support in going forward?
Councilor Cotton?
Yes, I certainly support affordable housing 110%. My question is specific on the actual where this lot is, since I'm familiar with the habitat area. And so there's the stormwater pond right down there at the end. And so is it from that area to the street that you're looking at and to the back of habitat? Is that about where it is? Or does it go all the butt up to the Better Way divisions down there? There's like a cul-de-sac and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so 9033 is the upper side. There's actually 28 acres. And this is the upper half of the 14 acres on the upper side of it. The site that's buildable, and Director Arteche is very familiar with this, is at the end of Gravenstein. So you can see Gravenstein comes down to the middle part of that parcel up
Right.
above.
Yeah.
It's to the lower part. It's 1 acre out of that 14.
So it's not going towards like the Orchard Street Bridge and Kimball Creek running through there. It's on the street side of that property.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
And it would be accessed from Parkway or from Gravenstein?
From Gravenstein. Yeah, because of the slope, and I walked it, it looks like it's very accessible. It's really not that accessible to the Parkway, other than it is walkable.
Yeah, I mean,
There
from the
is a
Kimball
trail.
Creek Trail comes right through that. It's actually probably right where it would be, is at that start of the Kimball Creek Trail.
If you come off of Gravenstein,
Okay.
yes.
Councilor Benson?
Yeah, I was listening to one of the meetings where you guys were talking about the cost that would be involved in putting a bridge over the swale from the Parkway, and it'd be prohibitive to, but one of the things that I was concerned about, I don't know from acres how many units we could imagine putting on an acre. I'm not good at that sort of thing. Do you have a ballpark?
It's more than this site would support, because remember when we did the mill site, it was the entire
right.
parcel. And in this case, it would be over 200 units. We're really talking
Really?
about maybe 50 units.
50,
is
so
what's
so
sustainable.
50 units. That's the one concern that I have is creating kind of another frontier situation. You know, that's the scariest part for me, is just where Panorama is located, there's one way in, and I know there's ideas for improving that in the future, which I will be very excited to do, but it's kind of a scary thought when you consider the potential for an emergency and ingress and egress and all that. And so that would be one issue that we would have to address if we were looking at this parcel, to just have Gravenstein as the only way for those 50 more units of people and cars to get in, would be my biggest concern there. But I love the idea of using this space.
So Councilor Christensen and then Councilor Washington.
My concern was similar to Councilmember Benson. It's having, or I guess, have we asked fire and police to weigh in on whether or not they would be able to provide access or have access there, given the potential parking issues? Obviously, as the community there was designed, it wasn't designed with the additional traffic in mind. And I would just be concerned about being able to get the rig in. We had a fire, or God knows what else. It would make me a little bit nervous to have a large apartment complex if there wasn't a second way in or out of the building.
So Councilor Washington was next.
Okay, so two questions. I have a follow-up question. So can you go to slide? Thank you, Councilmember Wong. Great presentation. When you did this and the CD committee and you're pulling it all the way through. Great work. Can you go to slide number 6, please? Sorry, 7. I'm so sorry, 7.
Options.
Learn to wear my glasses here. Okay. So when we look at panorama, and I'm not as familiar with the panorama development, but it's my understanding that we did option, was it a combination between 4 and 5?
No, that was purely to meet their, first of all,
Mhm.
they were required to have affordable housing and
Mhm, mhm.
the Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Right, that was an
certainly
affordable
knows
housing
that.
project, period.
Yeah. And secondly, every unit is 60% AMI, and that was by their choice. And thirdly, it's 191 units with some being 4 and 5 bedrooms. So
Mhm.
it's rather large scale. And part of the reasoning behind that is in order to make it pencil out for that 60% is having more bedrooms helps with the equation. In this case, it comes back to parking again.
Mhm.
And, you know, the more bedrooms you have, the more young families you'll
Correct.
have. I think that those are kind of natural things that go together.
Just to follow.
Follow up, then Councilor Vincent
So
afterwards.
just with the parking, kind of looking at this space. Limited for parking. I think Councilmember Christensen mentioned that it wasn't necessarily built with the idea of having denser housing in this area. What do you envision for parking? Are we talking underground or parking on the first, second level? And
According to our engineers
Okay.
and architect, this would be ideal to have parking underneath the structure itself. So that will help some of that. Put it in perspective, the city of North Bend has an RFP out right now today. They invited developers to come in and basically have a workshop today. I have no idea how many showed up for it, but City of North Bend on 0.4 acres is thinking about 15, 16 units as being the maximum. This is slightly more than double. So given that same premise, the 50 units may be optimistic, overly optimistic. It may come back that the developers will say 35 is the max. And again, making sure that we have one vehicle parking space for every unit, and then enough for visitors is probably, and I don't think we need to really determine how many parking spaces there are or how many units, but to make it so that it's open to invite people or organizations to come in and give it their best shot. And the more affordable units, the higher it scores, the higher they are in consideration. But the reality is we may only get 2 or 3 bidders back on it too. So just put things in perspective.
Councilor Vincent?
Yeah, my question was along the same lines. If we had underground parking, what is the leeway that we have, considering the fact that that is a downward sloping lot? What leeway do we have as a council to loosen the height restriction to accommodate more units if they're putting parking in that underneath? And the other thing that I would want to push back on what you just said is I think we do need to think ahead about parking. I would love to say that's not our area of expertise. It certainly isn't, but that never stops us from chiming in. And I think that if we look at history and what's happened at Panorama with parking, it's something that we do need to, if we're not experts on, become experts on and give input on, because if we produce another parking issue like Panorama has, then that will be a failure on our part. I think part of the problem is subleasing of, some of those 5-bedroom apartments are occupied by several families. And so one parking space per unit isn't necessarily going to work for parking.
Counselor or City Administrator Chambliss.
I would encourage council to focus right there. Councilperson Benson, when you're putting together an RFP, if you choose to go the RFP route, that is one of the components you need to include in it is what is that ratio, and that's the proper place to focus. Whether or not it goes underground or on top of the house or whatever, that's means and methods. That's up to them to propose. And then you ultimately make a decision down the road. The key factor is whether it's 1 per unit, 2 per unit, 3 per unit. I believe Panorama is 1 per unit plus another 20% that they charge extra for. I think we see that doesn't really work. So that is the key information you need in that RFP to get a good work product.
Yeah, what we need to do is just make sure that we don't turn Gravenstein into parking lot for this project, or this house. Or
Gravenstein's already got its own part.
Counselor Washington.
Yeah, and also just to kind of further that point, I mean, it changes the profile a little bit. So if we're going to put it on the side of the building in a parking structure, that's definitely going to limit the profile for what we can build.
Counselor Johnson.
In terms of the height, because of where it's located with the trees and all that stuff, I think that height is less of an issue for me with regard to allowing them to go somewhat higher than whatever the code officially says. If it needs to pencil out and that's what they come back with, and they can justify that they need some extra leverage on the height, it's not going to affect any view sheds. As long as it's within reason. I mean, it's built a skyscraper, obviously that's different, but
20 stories.
yeah, exactly. 20-story building, but yeah, in terms of the height though, I think that we should say that the council is open to variances on the height as needed to accommodate parking and units, et cetera.
Good point.
Let me bring up another topic. Oh, please.
Well, and
Oh, I'm
Mayor Pro
sorry.
Tem
I mean,
Holloway.
I'm all for, hey, make us a proposal. But I want to make sure we're going eyes open. This is the property, I'll call it downhill from the habitat. Please be aware, this is not the first time we've discussed this piece of property as a city. In prior discussions, there were severe feasibility issues. Primarily, this property is, call it below grade and height wise. So in order to get the wastewater out, you either had to install grinder pumps in the individual units, which would be additional costs, or there had to be something along the lines of a pump station to get that solid waste up and into the system so it could flow gravity wise. Maybe things have changed. I don't think gravity changed, but maybe things have changed. So just be aware as you're getting in, when you're getting in discussions like underground parking, you're only going deeper. That may make this issue harder to make the whole equation work. Okay, so just be aware of the grade in regards to city systems that we'll have to service and how we deal with it.
Let me ask one more question, and that is RFP or RFQ. And I'll let Director Arteche kind of explain the difference between the two, because obviously I'm leaning one direction, but I'd like to defer to Director Arteche.
I think Councilmember Watton is leaning towards the RFP, which stands for a request for proposals. I would argue that I would be leaning towards the request for qualifications. As a more, not to ignore the other, but it'd be more like a two-step process. You would solicit out amongst the development community for simply a request of their qualifications, and that could be vetted by a select group, could be the council, could be a task force, could be, combination, to select a certain number, maybe up to 3 or 4 qualified candidates to come in and make proposals directly to the council about their ability to deliver a project. So it is a vetting process. A request for proposals directly puts out the project. You really ask a lot to a very large group of people that may not have any chance of actually getting hired or selected to do the job. You put out a request for qualifications, and at least you have the opportunity to vet and select a smaller group that you think can go ahead and do the job. And then they go back, that development team goes back, puts together all of their experts to put forward their best proposal that is reviewed and examined or scored. And then ultimately a candidate is selected from that group. That's in a nutshell how the difference between the two.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
I guess I'm getting mixed signals on the end goal here. Is the intent that what is eventually put in place here is a project paid for by the city and therefore owned by the city and managed by the city thereafter? Or are we looking for proposals for somebody to come in and do development? And what considerations might they need from us in order to make this close? But ultimately it becomes somebody else's property, building, and ongoing concern.
I think that's an excellent question. That should be the bulk of the rest of the time we have here today to discuss that. We have not discussed that.
Serious discussion, because I'm not sure how we do the former. The latter we've done before, but I don't know how we do the former of a city-sponsored, owned affordable housing project. Nor do I think we are probably the appropriate organization to manage that moving forward. We don't have that experience or expertise in-house.
Oh, you could do it.
I don't think.
Not employed here.
I don't think, I think that the two are different. I think you could still have an RFQ and not be required to own and operate an affordable housing or a task force housing development project. I think what I was referring to is, what does the city do with this property? Does it lease it? Does it sell it? Does it do a long-term lease back? What is the arrangement between the land that the city owns, the money that the city has in its affordable housing fund, and a developer?
Can I
Mayor Pro Tem
reply?
Holloway? And then Councilor Washington?
And again, that's where you get into the confusing terminology. Lease back means it comes back to the city. I really think we ought to go in this fully aware of what the end goal is. And I don't believe that is that the city owns this at the end of this or manages it anytime in the future. We want affordable housing, but we're not in the business of it.
Correct. You're absolutely right about that. We're not here to develop it. We're here to hire somebody else to
Somebody knows what
develop
you're
it.
doing.
I think the one consideration is if the city holds on to it and say developer A comes in and they run it for 20 years and then they decide, wait a moment, we're going to sell this off. Rather than selling it off, that the city has to approve the new acquiring organization. And that organization meets the same qualifications the existing one does. By the city owning the property and managing it, we can stipulate what our expectations are within legal realm of how those are to be operated. And at some point, we can reel it back so that we have more control over it, is my thought.
Okay.
But again, it's has to be deferred over to legal.
I think Councilor Washington, you were in the queue. Did you want to
Yeah.
speak to this? And then
So-
Councilor Benson and Christensen?
So just two things real quickly. The first, I think we have to have a pretty thorough conversation here and have other questions answered before we decide on the RFQ or RFP. At our community development committee meeting, City Administrator Chambliss did a really excellent job, and I'm so sorry I can't commit all those details to memory. But you did an excellent job of explaining, potentially looking at the difference between RFP and RFQ and what we would potentially be leaving on the table with either one of them. Do you remember that conversation? Could you remind me again? Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. The way I think of RFP and RFQ, the shorthand I use is if I want to buy a thing, I use an RFP because I'm going to get the price and I'm going to know what that thing is. I'm going to know all about the thing because I'm going to tell them exactly what I want that thing to be. If I want to design something that I don't necessarily know all those details about, I would think about an RFQ because I want to hire the best person to give me the best design for that thing. One thing to consider is how often are we doing this type of work in this organization? How often are we writing these documents? And the likelihood that some little piece of information could be missed, like say parking ratios, sewer line locations and elevations.
Important stuff.
Very important stuff that can make or break a project. And an RFQ, as Director Ateche says, is how you kind of minimize and mitigate those chances.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Counselor Benson?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it's the city owns the land, so however that land is transferred, even if the developer has ownership in the end of it, we could attach stipulations to that and future sales of that property within the boundary of our transfer to the initial developer, couldn't we?
Yes.
Like if we wanted this to be whatever the percentages of affordable housing were, and we said, hey, the deal is you get this land, but that's the way the percentages have to remain. We could do that even if the developer transfers it, sells it to somebody else, couldn't we?
I'm kind of looking at David too, but yeah, our city does a lot of development agreements. I mean, this could be a development agreement. You certainly went through a development agreement not too long ago with affordable housing. Now we have actual numbers that we could look at. There's lots of things that we could stipulate, and all of that could be done through a development agreement. And I just also like to add that there's other incentives that we could consider before moving too far forward, such things that we've done in the past, like the multifamily tax exemption, like creating a residential targeted area. Those are huge incentives to bring someone along and to sweeten the deal when they know those are things that are really tangible that this council has recently accomplished. And we had the forethought of doing more and considering other areas of our community that would benefit from those exemptions.
Counselor Christensen, did you still have a comment?
Yeah, I think just personally, I would have concerns about maintaining an ownership interest in the property once we did this. I think that a better solution would be to move forward with a development agreement and ensure that we do maintain whatever controls we want on the property. But I would be concerned about keeping ownership of the property and potential liability in the event something happened. And I think that again, that control aspect can be managed in a different way. My preference, I think at this point, based on the conversations that we've had and the information provided from the city administrator, would be to move forward with the RFQ, just again, to mitigate around and just try to reduce the risk of missing a key component that we just may not be aware of because it's outside of our expertise, having not done a project like this in the city before. And I think that it gives us a better ability to weed out, to the extent that we end up generating a lot of interest, to weed out groups that may not be a good fit before we get further.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, one thing that might be different from some of our experience on council of dealing with development agreements in the recent past is that this parcel is owned by us rather than the developer currently. So as we are coming up with a development agreement, which would probably include or could include the sale of the property to that entity, we don't have to worry about an issue of, well, the code said this when they put in their application, then that's the code that it sits with. It's ours. It's our land. And we can kind of do what we want with it along the way. Now, there would be, of course, at some point, probably some sort of an MOU. I think that's kind of a standard practice, so that they know that we're not going to pull some rug out from under them at the last minute. Put in some wild stipulation that's impossible to meet, and then they've wasted a whole bunch of money, et cetera. But at any rate, I think that makes things a little bit easier to handle issues of making sure that it remains affordable housing into the future. One of city attorney will have to correct my memory on this, but I believe that there was some sort of a court ruling at some point in the recent past that said that a city can't say, okay, this development right here, they got to take care of all of our, it's privately owned previously, has to take care of all of our affordable housing problems. That it has to be spread equally. But I think that, again, the fact that we own this land makes it a lot easier to get around that issue. The attorney can correct me if I'm wrong. In my memory.
Like inclusionary, so at the affordable housing or city attorney?
So thank you, Mayor. So kind of feeding off of what was being described earlier, there are, in exchange for giving a developer an opportunity to use city property to make money, you can impose all kinds of goals and restrictions on what you want them to do with that property and how they're going to develop it. And if one of those things is to maintain a level of affordability over a certain period of time, or to develop something in a certain way that it can be used, for certain purposes for so long, you can include all of those, in your criteria. And I would go back to the RFP, RFQ issue. The two are not mutually exclusive. If you're going to be doing anything that's soliciting architecture services, you have to do an RFQ. That's just state law. So if you're asking an architect to design something or provide architectural renderings for a project, you would have to use an RFQ in order to do that. However, like I said, they're not mutually exclusive. It would be entirely appropriate to do an RFQ as a first step to identify, as kind of was described earlier, qualified businesses who might be a good fit for you to work with going forward, or to receive a more targeted RFP later on, once you've narrowed down what it is that you want. And you can even combine some of those RFP elements with an RFQ, as long as you're not trying to negotiate the price. But I've seen it done in the past, as an RFQ would go out, you would identify the partners that you would potentially be working with based on the responses that you get. You wouldn't want to narrow it down too much. You certainly want to keep your options open. But then, an RFQ under state law means you can't negotiate price up front. You only do that after you've selected the person you're going to work with. Well, price can mean a lot of different things. So you can have a lot of strings attached as you're negotiating the price with that particular partner. And if one of the, if you have ideas about limitations on what this property can be used for, or things that benefits that the city gets down the road or that other residents get down the road, those are all things that you can negotiate as part of your negotiation with the selected party. So.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
Okay, but I want to make a distinction between what we're talking about an RFQ here versus RFQ for professional services. Okay, this is not an RFQ for professional services per se, as outlined in the Washington State Code. This is merely who's qualified to do a proposal for us in regards to affordable housing on this site.
So, but what I'm saying is it depends on what you're asking for. If what you're asking for is for for architectural renderings or anything like that, architectural work, you would have to go through an RFQ process. You could not do anything else other than that. That's required.
Right, for professional services. I agree.
Councilor Johnson?
Okay, so we can't pick someone who is going to give us so-called renderite. If you're not familiar with that, it's where you have a building that you get a nice pretty picture of it, but it doesn't make sense from an engineering perspective. It can't stand, but someone could make any pretty picture using software. So someone who, if we went for an RFP and they gave us designs that are impossible to build, but none of us are qualified to look through those pictures and be like, that doesn't exist. That can't happen. You have floating floors that need pillars to hold them up. So what I think that I'm hearing is that even just to get, say, a rendering of this is kind of what we're thinking, this is how we're thinking about looking at the site, and here's what the building could look like, even that would need an RFQ. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, although keep in mind, you know, if you choose a developer to work with through an RFP process, that developer can go out and hire their own architect. They don't have to have the city do the architectural selection for them. So if you did this as an RFP just for a developer to make proposals to you, you could do it that way, but you would have no control over who they picked for their subcontractors.
Do you have your hand up, Councilor Benson?
Just a quick question. It sounds like one asset that the city has toward building this affordable housing is the land itself. And I didn't see the assessed value of that land. I'd be interested to know if we have any idea what that land is valued at, because that seems like important information, and a potentially large asset.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
Did you want to answer that?
Oh.
Quick answer. It's on the county assessor as minimal. So maybe
It's got a
30,000.
rough geography.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
It's got a rough geography.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
Okay, but I still want, I guess I still want to go back. Because at no time are we asking them to build a building and we, the city, will pay for it. We're asking them to make proposals to us that they will build the building. We can talk about how long they administer it, and administer it, and what considerations do they need from us in providing affordable housing as a component to that to make the business case close. Okay, so I think the first one is just opening it up to say, we're looking for interested party. Tell us what your qualifications are for that next conversation of potentially you making a proposal to us of what to do on this land. And we're willing to work with you. So it's not an RF. I don't want to get it stuck on an RFQ per the Washington State Code. That's a different element for particularly professional services. This is just, what are your qualifications to come have this conversation with us about how you could do something on this piece of property and what considerations you need from us in order to do it, such as the property itself or tax forgiveness or whatever. But at no shape and form do I think we're proposing that we actually go out and contract out the building of affordable housing to be owned and managed by the city of Snoqualmie.
Councilman Watton, did you?
Yeah, just to kind of wrap up, I guess. My inclination, and I totally get the request for qualification, but we can write an RFP any way we want to. The city of North Bend has done one. It's a less than one page if you go to the city's website. Other cities, including the city of Ellensburg, the city of Seattle, city of Tacoma, have much more extensive. They typically are 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long, but you can be as brief or as long as possible. And I think the other thing is putting in the beginning portion of the RFP is tell us your qualifications, and it wouldn't necessarily be scoring, but we determine whether they're eligible to meet our needs as an RFP. But I would defer to Attorney Lenahan on that.
Yeah, I think you're restating what I was, maybe didn't say as eloquently as I was trying to, which is you can call it whatever you want. You can do the process however you want. The only thing that restrains you is if you're going to ask somebody to provide you with architectural drawings or the design for a building, you have to do an RFQ process. But if you're doing something else, you can call it what you want, you can design it how you want, and it's not uncommon at all, like you said, to have a very bare bones RFP or a very complicated RFP that gives direction to the types of responses you would like to receive.
How about Councilmember Johnson? And then we probably should wrap it up. There's quite a few people like congregating out there.
Yeah, I
Special
was,
events.
going to suggest that we take this back to CDC to maybe put together a draft and bring that back to council based on our discussion here. I think that I have a decent sense of where we might be headed. And if I'm wrong, then you guys will tell us when we bring it back from CDC.
That sounds great. So put it on the next, possibly the
Put
next
it on it. Yep.
agenda.
Agenda issue
Yeah, for
for
CDC.
next week
Right.
for
Yeah.
CD.
That sounds good.
Yep.
All right. So with that, we'll come to the end. Is there?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember
Thank you.
Watt.
Very nice. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Councilor Washington. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And we are adjourned.
Good job, buddy.
Nice job, Councilor.
As long as it's like.
Yeah, because I feel like every.
Yeah.
Recording? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Council, we just completed a roundtable and now we're beginning our regular meeting of City Council. So let the record show that all council are present. And council, please stand and join me in the saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilor Christensen, would you please lead the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on the regular business is to approve the agenda. Council, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and second by Councilor Christensen. Is there any discussion?
No.
I believe we will remove the last executive session from the agenda.
Okay.
Anything
And a
else?
motion.
Move the last executive session.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Johnson to remove the last executive session. Anything else? So on that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? So that passes. And back to the original motion of passing the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And the agenda is approved as changed. So the first item, we have a very special evening tonight. We're welcoming 3 police officers. And then we'll do a badge pinning for our new deputy fire chief. So we will start by having our Chief Lynch introduce our new officers.
Good evening, council, mayor. This thing on? Okay.
thank you guys for showing up for this. This is awesome. You're here for this, right? Yeah. Okay.
No football yet.
Yeah.
Concert later.
So, of all the duties that I do, I've told you before, this is one of the greatest things that I get to do, stand up here and talk about my guys. And in the three gentlemen that are sitting up in the front row there, I believe that we have picked three outstanding young men that have stepped up and they heard the call and they answered, and they're here to be a part of this community and to keep people safe and to do what they can to make this a better place. So I could not be more happy with the three of them. They've all just got back at the end of last week from the academy. So they are now in the field training program, which is going to take them about 3 to 4 months. They're not allowed to work by themselves. They have to have another officer with them in the car as their supervisor and their mentor and their trainer. And it's a long, grueling process to become a solo qualified officer, but these three are well on their way. When I've during the introductions, I'll let you know which one likes to get into the stuff really quick right off the bat. So he thinks that this is the coolest place ever just in his first week of doing police work. So, but first I'll ask Officer Jesse Westman to stand up. So Officer Westman is from this area, grew up in the Issaquah area. When he was in elementary school in 5th grade, he had a DARE teacher that came and did DARE. And ever since, he has wanted to be a police officer. And he comes to us with a year experience at the King County Sheriff's Department. And there was a brief break after leaving that department, which required him, when we hired him, to go down to Vancouver for 2 weeks and take the equivalency academy instead of doing the whole entire academy over again. So we loaned him out to them down in Vancouver for 2 weeks, and he came back the same day that the other two got out of the full academy. So far, I've been very impressed with Jesse. He is somebody that thrives on wanting to serve. I can tell that with the way that he interacts with just the people that at my agency, the people that I've seen him talk to in the city. He is representing us very well, even the first week that he's with us. So Jesse, I appreciate it. I'm thinking that you don't want to say anything, or, you know, you're good. All right, you can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you. Now the next one, Max Bostic, and my first hires last year. And I was so impressed with this kid. He is very professional right off the bat. When we put them into a pre-academy mentoring program, and I give him projects and things to do, he was bringing back work that was better than what I could have done. So for that, I really appreciate it. He lives in this area. He lives in Snoqualmie. He's got a wife and that little cute little baby over there. Yeah. So they actually had their daughter like a couple weeks after he started with us in December. So he's been doing this as a brand new dad and going through the academy. So
Dedication.
we're happy to have Max, and I see good things, you know, in his future in this department. He definitely has a leadership quality that came from his time in the Army. He was an officer in the United States Army, and it shows in the quality of human being that he is when he came to our department. You want to say anything, Max?
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
And then Eric Rasmussen, Officer Rasmussen. Before I go into Officer Rasmussen, it just popped in my head that these two, Officer Rasmussen and Officer Bostic, went to the same academy, and Officer Bostic scored #1 overall in his class for all of the firearms, all of the driving, the books, the studying and doing the tests, #1 overall. And right behind him, I was very proud, Officer Rasmussen came in #2 overall. So it was a great time to be at the academy last week when these two graduated, because we were getting all kinds of awards. It was really cool. So Officer Rasmussen also comes to us from the military, and he was a squad leader a sniper. He's done pretty much all of it. And it shows once again in his leadership qualities. The months that we had him and Max at the station before they went away to the academy, they were the funnest guys to be around. We actually missed them when they left for the 5.5 months, but we're now happy to have them back. And like I told you, I was going to let you know which one of these can find crime like no other. It's Officer Rasmussen. So his first day, got in a foot pursuit, had a guy stop and turn around and produce a collapsible baton. He had to draw his weapon, and then a stolen car came up and the guy jumped through the window and took off, dragging him down the road. So he was excited. Yes, Eric, this happens every day here. So. And then this morning he's out running a license plate up at Snoqualmie and finds a stolen RV with people that don't want to come out. And, you know, we have broken glass, we have somebody tased, we have 2 in custody. And once again, he's at the helm of that ship. So I can't say enough about these guys. We have picked quality people to work for us and for the community. And I look forward to what their careers will hold. So right now I'd like to have Mayor Ross come up and get them sworn in. And then we'll do a photo op.
Right. So this will be a ceremonial oath of office because each one is previously had the oath so that they can be on the streets and work. So we'll start with Jesse. Testing. Okay. So I say your name.
I, Jesse Westman,
Having been duly appointed to the office of the police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington,
having been duly appointed to the office of police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and the laws and the Constitution of the state of Washington and of the United States of America. Congratulations.
Him to get that.
and the laws and the laws and the Constitution of the state of Washington, the United States.
State Constitution piece in there.
Let's get out of the way. State Constitution piece.
Max Boston. Right. So I, you say your name,
I, Max Bostic,
have been duly appointed to the office of police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington,
having been duly appointed to the office of police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and the laws and Constitution of the state of Washington and of the United States of America.
and the laws and Constitution of the state of Washington and the United States of America. All right, thank you.
That's a picture of.
Eric Rasmussen. So I say your name.
I, Eric Rasmussen,
Have been duly appointed to the office of police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington.
have been duly appointed to the office of police officer of the city of Snoqualmie, Washington.
Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability.
Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
And I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances of the city of Snoqualmie
and the laws and constitution of the state of Washington and of the United States of America.
and the laws and constitution of the state of Washington and the United States of America.
Next is the badge pinning for the new Deputy Fire Chief, Chris Brown. So we're very excited to have Chris Brown join the fire department with his long fire service career. Chief Bailey, would you please introduce him?
Absolutely. Come on up here, Chris. I gotta stand here, you gotta stand here. Get used to it. Good evening, council, mayor, city staff, and friends and family that gathered here today. I don't have three, I only have one, but today I want to introduce Chris Brown to you as our new deputy fire chief. Chris began his fire service career in October of 2022 as a firefighter with the United States Air Force. During his Air Force career, he and his family served 5 different fire departments, due to locations spanning from Florida, Honduras, England, back to Florida, and finishing in Alaska. He finished his career in the Air Force as a deputy fire chief in November of 2022. And then from there, he joined the Washington State Fire Training Center up in North Bend as the chief of training. After a selection process back in May, Chris was selected for his training background and leadership qualities that we have in the fire department. I'm looking forward to him joining the team at the station, and his first day is set to be July 1st. So another week or so here. Tonight, Chris is accompanied by his wife, Megan, and a paraeducator at Timber Ridge Elementary School. And they're also joined by their children, Evan, who is a senior at in the fall at Two Rivers, and Lily, a 7th grader at Twin Falls Middle School. And then another daughter, Haley, is currently attending college at Western Washington, couldn't be with us here tonight. Chris and his family moved to Snoqualmie Valley in 2022. And with the recent purchase of their home in North Bend, they feel like they cemented their place in the area for many years to come. So again, super excited to have him here. It's been a year since we've been able to have that position filled. And I think he's going to be bringing some great things to the department, some great energy. And I'm looking forward for him to work side by side with me in the fire department and also be here in front of you in the council as we move forward. So Mayor, would you like to come up and present Chris with his helmet? And as by tradition in the fire service, a loved one will pin his badge. Wisely, Chris has chosen his wife Megan to do it for him.
Yes.
council members, mayor. It's an honor and privilege for myself and my family and I to serve as the next deputy chief of Snoqualmie Fire. Long time coming for my family and I. I've really enjoyed what I've been able to do up at the training academy for the past 2 years, but really excited to bring all my experience and knowledge and everything that I have in my tool belt to Snoqualmie Fire after 20 years in the Air Force and a few years at the academy. So it's an honor and privilege again. Thank you. And I look forward to meeting every single one of you in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the next is a public hearing portion of our meeting, and it is regarding the AB 24-072, the 2025 to 2030 Transportation Improvement Program. And we don't, did anyone sign in to talk about transportation? Okay. I don't believe there's anyone that's signing. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Yeah, can we give those who are here for just what we just did a minute if you want to get out of here before we get into the other stuff?
Stay for the whole thing.
Good call.
Dylan, will you check the sheet? Thank you.
If you'd like to
Okay.
move up, this would be a perfect opportunity.
Okay. So because no one has signed in to speak for the Transportation Improvement Public Hearing, I now close it at 7:19 p.m. So, next item is public comment. So at this time, we will provide time for residents to comment on items not on the agenda. No online public comments will be accepted during the meeting. Written comments are encouraged and may be submitted to in-person, mail, or email to our city clerk at snoqualmiewa.gov. So first, a few ground rules. Snoqualmie residents who are not present have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Please wait to be recognized and state your name and city of residence for the record. Direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members. Please note that this is not a time to ask questions of council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. Public comments during this portion of the meeting shall be limited to topics concerning current, future, or requested city projects, actions, programs, plans, and regulations. Comments not pertaining to these subject matters are not germane and may result in your comments being suspended. So again, this is for open public comment regarding anything that's not on the agenda. So if you're here for the community center, that's actually coming up next. So maybe hold your comments for that. Otherwise, if you have something else you would like to talk about for 3 minutes, please raise your hand. Okay.
Mayor.
Councilor
Technically it's not next, but it is soon on the agenda.
Thank you. Yes, please state your name and city of address, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna say it quick. My name is April Brown and my name is April Brown and I live at the Panorama Apartments in Snoqualmie up on the ridge. And I would just come and tell them that something done happened to the complex where I was told Friday, and I knew for about 3 months or 4 months, something's been going on there. No people's been there. No maintenance people been there, and they used to work on Saturday. Nobody's worked on Saturday, and there's so much garbage out there just now, and there was dog poop everywhere. And I found out that they have no managers, period, there. People came down from corporate and been in the offices trying to be managers, and so I went in there to do a complaint, and no work orders been done. I had rats in my garage. They gave me a garage, and people are storing food in them. So they got in my car, and I seen a little piece of candy that's been in there for a long time, and it was ate up. So I put a work order in 4 months ago, and they haven't did anything. And now I find out no managers are there. One lady come in, they only work, they come on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, some day Friday, but no, and I took a picture just now. There's garbage all outside, just piled up, a whole bunch of it. And there's rats. And I took the pictures just before I got here. They're all out, the garbage is outside, all on the ground. They're supposed to be in dumpsters. And no managers, they're all gone. So we don't know what happened. We don't know. And the maintenance man been there forever. They ain't there no more. So I talked to him. I said, where's Louise? They said, oh, Louise is gone. I said, you crazy. So no maintenance people didn't clean it up. And somebody left a gravy thing of water out there and it's been out there 4 days. Of plastic, you know, water you get, and they must have dropped it and it broke, but it's out there in a whole bunch of bottles just, and then no one's moved it. There's no people there no more. And whole bunch of drug activity. And I live in a building and I set up and I watch my car and and you're not supposed to park in there unless you live there and have a sticker. Guess what? So many people are parking there and they get out the cars, they park up here and they walk way down there and you see people nodding. I knock on the window and I said, you okay? Oh yeah, it's up there. There's a lot of meth and all kind of stuff going on at night. And they promised me 4 years ago when I moved in, they're gonna have security come on from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning. 4 years ago, not one person. Not none. And they promised us an exterminator to come. No exterminator has came and no people work there in that office. And if you go down there right now, you're gonna see the premises and it's only 4 years old. And it looks like it just don't look right. And I've been here 4 years and when it was first built. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you,
Can I go
April.
now? No.
Thank
But
you.
if you go past there, Mayor, you will see all the garbage.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing your concerns to us and we will check into it.
Okay, thank you. Can I
Thank
go?
you. Yes, you may.
Are you stuck here for the rest?
No, no, no. We- No, we appreciate it. Thank you.
You look real familiar. You look familiar and I just said over here, so where I know you from. I think that's
Okay,
'cause
thank you.
Yeah, that's him.
I know you from somewhere. I see He ain't telling me. I know it. You work at the cleaner somewhere.
Getting cussed out of the.
Is there anyone else like to speak to anything that's not on the agenda this evening?
Oh, please, if there's any more public comment.
All right. Okay, moving on. Is the consent agenda, which contains approval of the city council meeting minutes dated June 8th, 2024 and June 10th, 2024. Approve the claims report dated June 24th, 2024. AB 24079 authorization of the fire department vehicle purchase. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Christensen, second by Councilor Washington. Is there any public comment regarding any one of those items? So raise your hand. See none. Council, any discussion? All right, all those approved, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? And the consent agenda is approved. Next item is we have the fire first quarter 2024 accreditation report, which is for information only. Council, if you'd like to have any questions for our chief. I think maybe he left with the group. But if you have any, well, I don't know, do you have any questions regarding the fire report? Otherwise, it is in the packet for your information. Okay, seeing none. Is there any further public safety committee report?
Nothing further.
Is there any community development committee report?
No, currently no report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is AB 24-075, which is the 2025 to 2030 non-utilities capital improvement plan. Councilor Benson, would you please read the introduction and the motion?
Yeah, I think actually, Councilmember Cotton is gonna read that in. She was chairing the last Parks and Public Works Committee meeting.
Okay,
Okay, the purpose of this agenda bill is for council consideration of the mayor's 2025-2030 proposed capital improvement plan, CIP. The proposed CIP will be presented to the city council for deliberation. The planning and financial management tool helps the city of Snoqualmie identify and prioritize capital investments over a 6-year period. The CIP is required by the State of Washington Growth Management Act, GMA, RCW 70A, which is state law that requires local governments to plan and manage growth that would impact the environment and quality of life. The proposed action is a motion to approve resolution number 1692, approving the 2025-2030 non-utility capital improvement plan.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Cotton, second by Councilor Johnson. So next item is the public comment for this item. And so this is the capital improvement plan, which includes a variety of different projects. And I believe one of them is the community center. So if there's public comment regarding that, tonight we'll limit our comments to 2 minutes. And, the same information goes as I mentioned, as I read in earlier, about public comments. So with that, is there anyone that would like to take public comment? So you'll go over there and then state your name and city, please.
Hi there. My name is Emily Anderson. I live up on the ridge. I've been a Snoqualmie resident for 6 years now. I live with my family. I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. So good luck to me the next coming years. I'm also the current chair of the Snoqualmie Parks and Events Commission. And I feel like that gives me a unique perspective on having been a part of the community center expansion project planning and updates, at least for the last 1.5 years, 2 years, something like that. I'm here to voice my support for this project. While serving on the commission, since I've been privy to it, I've noticed and been kind of had a firsthand take on the excellent work that the city staff has done in their planning and their approach to this project. It's my belief that they've created a very practical and functional financial plan for this project. And the main kind of component of me coming here today is how needed the pool and really this community center expansion project is for the city of Snoqualmie and also just for the surrounding area. As someone who grew up swimming in Portland, Oregon, having that resource was really valuable and I would love that for my kids. But I also see the benefit of having that for people of all ages. It's a very cool undertaking and I believe that now is the time to really get with the energy and to capitalize on the momentum that we have for this project. So that being said, I strongly support this project and I implore you, council members, to please approve moving forward with it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please state your name and city.
Jennifer Barr. I live in Snoqualmie. Thank you for having us. I, in addition to being a Snoqualmie resident, being a mom of a 5- and 7-year-old, I also have the privilege of being an employee of the Y. I have worked for the Y for 11 years. I have been a member of the Y for longer. I grew up learning to swim at the Y along with my 2 children. Unfortunately, we have had to travel far to have them swim at the Y. So I come really to ask you to vote yes to pass this bill. The expansion, sorry, I'm looking at my notes, allows us to provide thousands of Snoqualmie residents with more amenities, help them to swim and teach thousands of children, young adults and adults how to swim to prevent drowning in our rivers, to prevent drowning in pools and to prevent drowning all around, excuse me. The Y is America's swim instructor. It's the most accessible community resource to prevent drowning and encourage lifelong enjoyment of swimming. I hope you will join the Y in the supporting the expansion so we can serve more children and youth with a life-changing program. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Shelley Patterson and I live in Fall City, Washington. I'm a 23-year resident of the Valley, 16 years of which was spent living in Snoqualmie Ridge. And I love the word implore. I'm going to use that also. I'm here to implore this council to support taking on debt to fund the community center expansion to include the pool. And for me, this is a lot about fulfilling the promise made as part of the developer's mitigation plan to provide the community just such a center. And that's a promise made over over a quarter of a century ago to this community. A little bit about my perspective. I'm a 13-year member of the Snoqualmie YMCA Advisory Board and have been on it since its inception. Mother of 2 kids who are now 23 and 20, don't need swimming lessons anymore. And they were born and raised in the Snoqualmie Valley, and I drove them to swim lessons for over a decade, first to Pine Lake, then to North Bend. Then we discovered Tiger Mountain Aquatics, and I drove them over Highway 18 every week for 10 years so that they could learn how to swim and be safe. I served on the Encompass Board of Directors for 9 years, advocating for kids, families in this community. The Snoqualmie Parks Board for 5 or 6 years, and became very familiar with our levels of service requirements in the city, which I think are important to consider. And then I was on city council for 3 years while we were trying to get this done. During these years, I was on I voted for the very first bond campaign in 2001, which didn't pass, and was on the Vote Yes committee for the second and third ballot measures. We almost made it the third time. And so I would just ask you to finally get this over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melinda Johnson, and I've been a resident of Snoqualmie Ridge since 2015. And I also want to ask that favor be passed for the expansion of the Y, again, really emphasizing the safety for our kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it is such a struggle to be able to get into swim lessons anywhere, which is a vital life-saving skill with how much water we're surrounded by. There's a retention pond right behind my house, and there's the rivers and all of the lakes. It's a vital skill that our kids know. And I've joked with parents that it's harder to get into swim lessons than Taylor Swift concert tickets because it's so hard since we don't have a community pool here. And we're stuck at the whim of what other communities are offering. So View Community Center prioritizes North Bend residents, which I understand because they're the ones paying taxes. But then trying to hodgepodge multiple kids swim lessons at different levels with whatever's left is really hard. I've never been able to get into swim lessons in Issaquah. And for the Sammamish YMCA, their pool's been under refurbishment this past year. So our limits, not only are we limited by the whims of other communities a lot of their pools are too small for their own community, we're also limited because we're non-residents, so we're stuck with whatever's left. And so it's left us. I have parents and other moms who are willing to drive as far as Bellevue to get lessons. A lot of us are paying for private lessons just to be able to give our kids that skill. So we're really limiting our own kids' ability to be able to learn this life-giving skill. And I think it's actually would impact Snoqualmie economically as well, because both my kids, as well as the other families I know, when you swim, you get hungry, and we stop and get food in whatever town we are swimming in the moment. So I think there would be an economic impact by being able to have a pool here as well. And I know for a lot of us parents to be able to have one, it would be cost savings by having the Y here, but also the convenience factor would be helpful as well. So
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Rule, and I'm a 19-year Snoqualmie resident, and I work at the Snoqualmie Valley YMCA. I'm the Senior Director of Branch Operations. I started there 7 years ago, working at the front desk, and have had the opportunity to prove myself and move up at the branch and within the YMCA. I'm just here. I don't have notes. I'm just talking from the heart. every single day I see people coming in who think the pool's already been approved, come in with their swim goggles on and their floaties because they think we have a pool and we have to tell them we don't. But it's not just about an aquatic center. It's also about being able to fit the needs of our community. We're at capacity. I love seeing our new members, all the new families that come in. One of my greatest joys is seeing the family with their 2 kids, and they're like running into their other family friends that are neighbors, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, it's so great to see you. I didn't know you guys were members." "Yeah, we are. Hey, we should all go out afterwards after we get our workout in." So I'm just speaking here tonight just to say I obviously support the expansion, and I really hope you guys take into consideration voting yes for it. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Paul Swem. Was born on First Hill and I'm now on Douglas Hill on the Ridge. So I'm also the current vice chair of the Snoqualmie Parks and Events Commission, and I've been serving that body since 2014. I'm a charter member of the Snoqualmie Valley Y since 2012. I'm here in support of the project to expand that facility and build us a pool. Needless to say, it's been a long road and a lot of waiting on the parts of families and residents here for this moment and this opportunity to expand the facility. I commend the city staff for their work in what they have done in giving us information and bringing us to this moment. Lots of due diligence and applause to them. Since 2012, because I'm a swimmer, to Sammamish, Pole Creek, or a dangerous drive on the 18 to Kent, Auburn, or the South End to find myself a swimming pool. And to be honest, I am beyond sick of it. The Snoqualmie Valley is literally a 2-minute walk from my house, but I'm driving sometimes as long as 40 minutes to find a YMCA swimming pool. This is about safety, not just my needs, but the safety of children and lessons for them, and making lessons accessible to the community. In addition, low and no impact aquatics for folks as they age, like those of us with right hip replacements, would really appreciate having those aquatics opportunities. Someone mentioned earlier about economic opportunities that this provides, and this would bolster that equation as well by bringing more people in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Victor Ross and I live in Snoqualmie. I've been a member of the community for over 20 years. And I just want to thank the council and the mayor for the opportunity to comment tonight on the community center expansion. I've been reviewing and watching several of the council meeting videos over the last couple meetings, and I've noted there's been a lot of really good conversations surrounding this project. It is clear some of the concerns about moving forward due to the funding gap of about 18% of the estimated project total of 5.2 million. I support, along with 66% of my neighbors, this expansion. Be a visionary and support building a long overdue competitive pool. If you let this vision die, the funding gap will never be filled with the last dollars from King County or Washington legislatures, because it requires your support to secure those grants. In addition, I am hopeful that with your support, the Snoqualmie board will find a way to support this much needed project around out their sports programs and having better facilities to train. The city has worked hard the last 2 years and has identified nearly 82% of the estimated project costs without raising our property taxes. The city has 2 paths available for temporary funding using a line of credit or a councilmanic bond, both of which will not raise property taxes. My belief is if we build it, they will come. And based on overwhelming public support, it is the right investment for our community. As with most things in life, an important financial decision should be viewed with a long-term view. And this project will be a game changer for our youth, adults, senior citizens for decades. This project will be well supported by the voters and could become your legacy project. I encourage the council to vote yes on this community center expansion and pool. Thank you for your time.
My name is Bob Jeans. I live in Snoqualmie, 7606 Heather Avenue. I've lived here since 2001. This is the closest, thanks to Mayor Ross and thanks to the work of your council here. I congratulate you on getting you so closer than we've ever been to having a community center. I certainly support it. The thing about these 7 council members is due diligence is a big part of your life. And there are other items on for you to consider along with this community center, aquatic center. Do your due diligence, but and I know you're short. We haven't gotten all the money that is needed to do that. And I encourage you to continue to talk to those entities, including our partner in this endeavor, the YMCA. But I encourage you to talk to to the other entities as the tribe, school district, the Parks District in North Bend, and other public and private entities that I believe that those conversations will be fruitful if you help them understand that this community center and this aquatic center is for the benefit of the entire Snoqualmie Valley, Upper and Lower Valley. These are a lot of people to talk to. People who have told us no in the past, that we can't contribute, we can't participate. But this is a new council to me, as in there are new board members and council members and the tribal council. Continue to talk to those people with the optimism that this is such a good thing for everybody, that they would want to participate and even enhance the design and the applicability of the aquatic center. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Wells. I'm actually from Sammamish. And I work at the YMCA. I can tell you right now, you guys need a pool because at Sammamish, we get a lot of you guys down there. A ton of you guys. I recently transferred over to the Snoqualmie Y. Absolutely love it here. But even being down there for a short time, less than 2 weeks, I can tell you right now, the community wants it. The people come in every day. We have a lot of families that are begging for a pool. I don't live here, but I promise you this, what I know at Sammamish is people have absolutely loved it. It's going to be worth the money. It's going to be worth the time. We heard a lot about safety today. I think that's the #1 reason. We have a lot of young families. I'm pretty young myself. And if I were to move here, like, obviously that's something that I'd absolutely love. So thank you guys. I'm gonna keep it nice and short, but I promise I see a lot of Snoqualmie families out there in Sammamish. I'm sure they love a pool here in Snoqualmie. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Right, thank you everyone for your comments. So council, do you want to presentation or just begin discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, and then Councilor Benson.
I'll start my comment. First, I'm gonna tell you, I desperately want to pull. Okay, but there's a $5 million hole here. If I tell you yes tonight, it's not that I'm betting that on the come. I'm committing $5 million of future capital funds on this project. I want to run through some history. We did a contract with our design build partner for about, I won't say the price, but part of the discussion of that was utilization of about $1 million of county grant to fund that design effort. We approved that. I made argument to approve that. Subsequent to that, it was changed that only half of that was going to be based on the county and the rest came out of city coffers. That discussion did not come back to council until discovery. It's not a confidence building exercise at that moment for me. I'll further say at another meeting, there was a discussion of what should the focus of that design be, that design effort be. And we agreed the focus effort on that ought to be the full up design, but not to the exclusion of the more affordable options. Later on in discussions in the councils was advised that decision was interpreted as exclusionary, that those more affordable options were no longer on the table of the council. Not a confidence building motion on my part. Okay. I am concerned that wants and desires are overweighing good enough and affordable for the community. I am concerned at that $5 million hole. I am concerned that in the past X number of months, there has been no movement on additional partners nor funding levels from those partners in regards to this community center. So I highly doubt, I have a lack of confidence that we can close that $5 million hole based on past performance. So you're asking for approval of a $20 million capital project. I can ask the other council members who were here last time they approved a $20 million capital project. Not very often. This is a big deal. Okay, but I'm not, again, I desperately for all the reasons you said, but I'm not willing to sacrifice future for. But I'm not saying no. What I am saying is, let's hold off. Get those commitments we've talked about, fill in that $5 million hole. So I'm not sacrificing streets or other services of the city to do this. Before I make motion though, I would like to open the floor to hear the rest of the council.
Councilor Benson.
Yeah, I appreciate all of the public comment. I think I agree with all of it. I think there's a desperate need for a pool for safety for families. It is ridiculous that we have to travel so far if we want to swim. I think trying to save your kids from drowning by teaching them to swim should not come at the risk of dying on the 18. And so I think these are all really great points. But I think the point that brings up is that Snoqualmie's need for a pool is a regional need, and it needs to be handled in a regional way. If it's entirely handled by Snoqualmie, we're going to have the same problem in Snoqualmie that they have in North Bend. I just don't, the part that I can't feature is that $5.2 million deficit. The proposal is for the city to take out a line of credit for that $5.2 million. That line of credit does not all have to be accessed, which is a neat thing about a line of credit. But my gut feeling is that entire $5.2 million will be accessed. It will be used to build the pool. And then the hope is that once we get that line of credit and we've maxed it out, that we will get grant funding, maybe from the county, or other entities. It's a lovely hope, but what we are locked into, if that doesn't come through, is a bond. And 3 times this city has voted against a bond. The 66% favorability number that is often quoted is from a poll question that doesn't include using bond funding to pay for this pool. It doesn't introduce that tidbit. And I think that's an important tidbit when you consider that there have been 3 bond measures that have failed in the city of Snoqualmie. So a yes vote for me would be me saying, the voters keep getting it wrong. So the council will go ahead and remedy that mistake. That's not something that I can do. I am absolutely fine with a bond. It needs to be done properly, though. It needs to be, if you guys are right, if you think, yes, 66% of the people in the city want this, bond or no, then we need to do it that way. We need to bond it out properly. We can't have 7 people decide, or 4 out of 7 people decide to saddle the city with that bond that they've already voted down 3 times.
Counselor Christensen?
Yeah, I just had a few comments. One is we've gone through the process. The administration has been very careful. They put in countless hours in terms of developing the CIP, dealing with budgeting, things like that, and forecasting our revenues and expenditures. Before we got to identifying the funds that were available for the community center, first and foremost, they looked at what we needed to save and have on hand in order to go to our streets programs, as well as our sidewalks programs, and in terms of maintaining the additional funding that we need to ensure that our infrastructure remains secure and provided for in the plan. Again, that was done before looking at this. In addition to that, our finance department also looked at what the inflationary pressures were as well, so that as we looked forward over the years, we'd make sure that we had enough, not just now, but also accounting for inflation, which has been rather wonky over the past few years. Throughout the entire process, we've had a lot of community engagement in this. This has been going on since 2019. There have also been the bonds that were, that did not meet the 60% threshold. It wasn't that they were necessarily voted down, it's just that they didn't meet the higher measure. Again, I think that the most recent one, and I think that we did a poll last time of how many of the existing council members were here at the appropriate time to vote on that, and it was very few of them. So we've seen a lot of new folks coming in, and yet we are still hearing time and time again from our residents that they want this. The way that the current community center expansion project has been developed is based on our community needs, what folks wanted in focus groups, through surveys, through open houses. And we have the opportunity here to benefit every aspect of our community, whether it's young kids, whether it's our seniors. It would provide an economic boom, as has been stated from some of our other folks here. Another thing, or at least another concern that I have, is if we don't go forward with this now, we're going to see the costs continue to escalate. And even if we wait to see whether we can get the $4 million from King County, the gap isn't just going to be the 5.2 anymore. It's going to be even more substantial. And as we all know, what we've heard from our legislatures time and time again is they want to be the last dollar into the project. They want to make sure that they know that it's going forward before they contribute to it. They need to see our city council sit down and say, yes, we're going to do this. One of the other comments I wanted to make, and I don't know if anybody or if everyone was able to read all the materials that went out from staff, but if we go forward with the pool expansion, we could be adding 9,000 swim lessons for our residents. And if you look at the gap that's there, and which I think the most recent information we had was from 2022, there were 3,000 kids on the Sideview swim lessons. That doesn't even include the folks who didn't bother because there was basically no hope. Some other public safety stats I just wanted to make sure folks knew. There have been 9 people who drowned in our river, and there have been and that was since 2018. And there have been 46 swiftwater rescues. If we don't provide a safe place for folks to swim, then they're going to do other options, right? Our teens are going to go do other things that are concerning. right? But here we have the opportunity to provide swim lessons, a spot for our seniors. We can keep our people safer. And hopefully we can even help to reduce the increased calls that we keep hearing about from our fire department year after year. I think that if we don't go forward and make this investment into our community, that we will regret it and that our residents will regret it. And it'll be just a huge missed opportunity.
Councillor Washington.
Council Christensen makes some excellent points, and I agree with them all. And I thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for being here. This is a really rich conversation to have. I want to add some things to the conversation so we all understand what we're talking about here and what we're asking for and potentially looking at down the road. So currently, you know, I know we all are aware that we were in the 5th legislative district and we're going to transition to the 12th. We have 6 legislatures out there right now that haven't offered $1 to this project. I won't speak for anyone else but myself. That's a failure in my book that we need to do a better job at talking to our partners. 6 legislatures right now and not $1 considered for this project. To Councilmember Benson's point, the 66% on the survey did not include a bond measure question, surely did not include a councilmanic measure question. The other part of the conversation is operating budgets. They're 2 separate buckets, I understand that, but to continue current levels of service when we have ongoing contracts that we have to approve, there's some tough questions to be asked and tough decisions to be made there. So a question becomes, can we continue the current levels of service at what we have now? And the answer is no. We would ultimately need more money to close the delta. And so now, on the other hand, we're asking, well, okay, a councilmanic bond for 5.2 million, is that reasonable? In my mind, it's not. It's not a reasonable thing to ask taxpayers. I guess the other point I would make, kind of going back to our partners, and there was a comment made about that. So if we would consider the 18 million that we have in the CIP, potentially, it's 5.2 million to it, that gets the city to cover over 75%. I think the number is like 77% of this project on our own. Where's the logic in that? The pool's obviously going to be used by the entire valley. Why are we not having more partners be a part of this? So that's all I have to add for right now at this time.
Councillor Watton.
Let me bring some optimism to our discussion. First of all, the existing 15 million plus, those are funds coming through real estate excise tax. Those are dollars not for operating costs. Those are for capital investments. This happens to be a significant capital investment in our community. So we need to make sure that we're separating the capital improvement plan separate from our operating plan. This is not what paves the streets. This is not what keeps the lights on. This is not the overhead that we use for public safety. This is a separate bucket. We've been saving this money up for years, and that's the reason why we're sitting with $15+ million in there. I think there are a number of things. First of all, I would echo our Mayor Pro Tem's comments about the design build. Because when we passed this in August, I wasn't here in person. I joined remotely, but we did have the understanding that out of the 1.4 million of the design build, I believe it was 1.4, going to come from this bucket of money from King County, and we passed it on that. But there were a number of reasons for doing that. First of all, was design build means that we got to set prices if we could move forward, if we could find the financing. Design build meant that we could go out for the grants and that we had plans in hand to show the potential funders and the partners. That is still there. My disappointment is we didn't have more of input on the design build concept. I hope that we can going forward, because I still have serious concerns. And I've always said this, when you build a pool, the concrete is set, the walls are set. And I think that there's still nuances that I have concerns over that I've expressed. And you know, I don't want to go into the details of it, but I still think this pool has value for this community. I think one is we have a real need with Skyview's pool at 85 years old is at its end of life. And it would be devastating if we had an opportunity to do something today that would be the gem of Snoqualmie Valley and be ours. My next concern is this, and that's affordability and accessibility. I want families that are taxpayers here in the Valley, particularly in the city of Snoqualmie, being able to use the pool that they help fund. I have concerns that our current arrangement, while it has been very good with the YMCA, that we need to make sure that it's equitable for families first, and that kids that want to enroll in swim lessons that live here have priority. I also want to make sure that those that are not members have adequate accessibility to their city pool. And I want to make sure that that's clear. I have some concerns because as we look at, and remember, Snoqualmie was the first one in the YMCA system for the Seattle area to come up with this partnership. And it's been a good one. It has been very favorable for this valley. I think we need to take a deeper look, because adding a pool, if we look at other cities, including Federal Way, much larger, Issaquah, we look at Snohomish, and we look at Covington, which that pool is at end of life. But if we look at the rates that they charge their residents and what we would charge for this, for our residents, I'm concerned that it's 20 to 30% higher. Now, keep this in mind. Pools lose money. There is no way around it. Pools lose money, and it's going to be $1 million, $1.5 million if we own it and operate it. What we aren't losing is that deficit because it's being picked up by the YMCA. And I want to be totally fair. So, you know, as we talk about operating costs going up, well, we've got that pretty much locked in with having a partner like YMCA. And then the final thing is we have a gap of about $5.2 million. Well, that includes a $2.5 million investment from the YMCA and a lot of donations from individuals. Commitment?
No, the YMCA commitments is part of
Outside
their
of
number
that.
already. It's their $2.5 million.
Right.
5.2 is above and beyond that.
Right. And that's my point. It's 5.2 plus 2.5 million. So then I worked the numbers back from 8 million to see what it really impacts our families. And I have to say, whether we bond it as a councilmanic bond, or whether we do it as a line of credit, when I break out the costs over 4,000 some residents, it really doesn't work out to be a significant increase. It will increase the cost of the city, but it's coming from other funds. It's not as if it's going to show up on my taxes, but it's the opportunity cost. And let me make one final thing, because those of you know me, know that I'm passionate about affordable housing. And if we took that $32 million in that we're investing in a facility like this, how many units would it build? It would give us about 100 affordable units of housing, just as a comparison. How much of an impact will the YMCA or any other organization running the aquatic center here have on the families? I would beg to say it would have a far better impact, and it has an economic impact of bringing people here from other areas. So a balanced discussion. I think we're on the right track. I hope we're not that far away, but I do have my own concerns that I want to make sure that we meet.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, so much has been said that I don't feel the need to reiterate both tonight and over the last few years that I've been on the council regarding this. See where to begin though. Okay, one thing is that I think it's important for us to keep in mind that we have voted as a council for the pool many, many, many times in the eyes of the public. Now, from our perspective, what we are thinking is, what were we actually voting on? Things like having it on the CIP. That doesn't mean funding it and actually going and doing it. It means things like putting a bond on a ballot. And I'm talking, very long historical times we've voted quote unquote for the pool. It is no wonder that there could be some confusion amongst the pool. And many of our residents think we already did it. So why aren't there shovels in the ground? We've already passed this. And then they see another headline in the newspaper that says Snoqualmie City Council approves blah, blah, blah about the pool, right? It's kind of a heartbreaking picture to imagine some kids showing up with their goggles on and their floaties because their parents thought that we voted for the pool. I believe that we owe it to the public to get this across the finish line. I do not know if this exact proposal as it stands right now is the way that we will get there. But I think that we need to get there. We have never been so close in this city to fulfilling that promise from a generation plus ago to the city to get this done. The current plan, just to set the record straight to make sure that we're all on the same page here, does not add new taxes to our citizens. We are not raising sales taxes. We're not raising property taxes in this current plan. So just want to make that clear. And also that we did not remove CIP items from the future to get this done. We're not deciding, hey, streets, we can let them go because we really need the pool. Right. We didn't take streets off here. Sidewalk replacement program, which is very important to many of our residents who live up on the ridge where we have aging sidewalks. We didn't take that off. If there was some large thing that used to be on the CIP that we pulled, that was very important to our community in order to fund this, then I would definitely see that argument of, hey, we can't be replacing future things we would have expenditure on to do this instead. That is not the case. The plan is to continue funding our streets and our sidewalks and our other important programs. That said, again, I do not know if we have what we need to get this exact proposal to be the thing that we actually do. But I think that we can get there. I think that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. So there are at least two options that I see that we could try to follow to get there. Well, three. We could just go ahead and take a vote on this as it is and see where the chips fall. I haven't counted the votes. I don't know where they're going to fall, but we could do that. Second option is I am curious if the administration has a plan, which I believe they've been formulating for some time, and they've presented to us this something along these lines over the course of the last couple of months as we've been debating the CIP. I'm wondering if the administration has an alternative plan that closes that $5 million gap, perhaps that could get us there. Or we could look at, as a third option, saying, not now, but let's get the funding in order, and in, say, a couple of years. Once we have the funding, now let's go get it done. One of the things that I have found to have been a frustration, it's not really anyone's fault, it's just been the way that it's been, is when I've talked to community partners, until we actually had what is now in front of us, I didn't know what the plan was. I didn't know how much we needed. Was this an $18 million project, or was this a $35 million project? And our community partners would say, you don't even know how much you need. You don't even know what the final design looks like. You have some renderings of what it could be, but now that we have this, now I feel confident that I could talk to our community partners and say, hey, this is what we actually need. Here's the actual number. You get us this, we've got ourselves a community center. And here's what it looks like. We've got it ready to go. This is shovel ready. We just need those dollars. So those are kind of the three paths that I see. And
Okay, so I just want to say a couple things first. So we talked about public engagement. We have done a lot of public engagement on this project over several years. And most recently we heard we had a focus group that told us what was important, and we used all that information. The focus group built on what was part of the, I guess, town hall in 2019. So we took all that information, and then we had our architect, builder, construction, and then also we had is it WTI?
Yeah.
So WTI, who is an expert on pools. And so they took that, all our wishes, and came up with a design. We also held 2 open houses, a town hall in 2023, and then we had a comprehensive community survey, which mentioned was 66%. Now, if you look at, so the last time a bond was run was 2008. And I'm sure the majority of you were not living here in 2008. The comment was, okay, when we did the community center, it says survey, it said 66% were for it. If you look at a survey we took in 2019, it says there will be no new taxes needed for this community center expansion. The project will be funded using $10 million in existing city revenue sources, including cosmetic bonds. And the fund balances from these would be through real estate excise taxes that we're talking about, from large property sales. In addition, the YMCA will be directly contributing $2.5 million on the project. Initial perception of wanting a pool was 72%. After they heard the funding source, like, oh, we have to have a $10 million cosmetic bond, was still 72%. It didn't go down. People wanted it. And we're talking about half that amount today. We're talking $5 million, $5.2 million for that. So this is probably the most surveyed project we've ever had, most community input we've ever had. But we know there's definitely a want in our community. We also have a viable financial option to make this project a reality. We have access to a line of credit that may help bridge the gap, but then again, we may not even use it. Once we approve the project, then we'll go for the guaranteed maximum price. And at that point, that's the maximum price. And so we don't know the price that we have, it may be lower. And we haven't had, right, we have looked into different grants, and we've talked to legislatures, but the legislatures want to be the last dollar in, and they have the budget session coming up this next year. And you're right, we have 6 legislators, which is a plus. That's important, because then we have 6 legislators that will support Snoqualmie, not 3. And we need council to help. It's not up to me, and it's not up to my administration to go for grants although we go for grants, but to talk to legislatures and to talk to partners, and fundraising, we need your help. The Y is stepping up and they're starting their capital campaign. They have a whole list of foundations and people they want to approach, and they would love it if you guys can also provide that information as well. Of people that would be, that may donate. So this is kind of, we need to get through this fundraising, but also we need to get this project going. We talked about phasing back in October. I can show you all the different phases we offered. We went through, we had all the different prices right here. And it came back to, no, let's do the one that we've been working on. Let's not get rid of the recreation pool. Let's not get rid of the wave channel. Let's not do this. And so this is what we've been working to. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
Okay, so it's not a $5 million project from the city funds. It's a $20 million project. And at present, there are $5 million unidentified of where that's coming from. Now, I've approved CIPs in the past with that kind of stipulation in there that we'd go figure it out. I'm sorry, I have a lack of confidence. We'll go figure it out. We won't, and we'll be committed on that $5 million before we know it. Okay? Again, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying we need to figure out what is affordable, what partners can come in and fill that funding gap. Putting this on a line of credit is not funding it. It is financing it on debt that can be here for 20 years. Okay? I motion that the community center be moved in the CIP from 2025 to 2026, allowing administration to work on affordable options and partners with funding to close that gap. May I have a second?
Second it.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Cotton, to move it from 2025 to 2026. So Councilor Cotton, we have not heard from you yet.
Yes, as the newest and least experienced member of the council, I appreciate what every single one of my fellow council members has brought to the table on this. Is excellent and very valid points. I appreciate the community coming forward, both in person and, by email. We've seen so many things, coming through. The community center expansion, I have to say, I'm a strong advocate of public safety. That's, huge with me. And I certainly see the value in that. I see the value for the community as far as, what it can provide for all age groups within our community. I think the concerns that are, have been identified is that this is something that, well, we are so close, and I agree, it's an excellent idea on this, but we need to be working with our Valley partners. We need to, once Mount Si is no longer, functioning, everyone is, even before then is obviously going to be coming here. The concerns are that we aren't getting those other people stepping up, as far as the school district or, other entities within the valley that could potentially, come forward and help support this. So $5 million, $5.2 million is still a lot of money to me and we've already been doing some kind of shuffling around of different CIP projects and programs in here. I would hate to see that any of these vital, infrastructure projects and such, we have issues with. Now, I do kind of want to make my last point is that the CIP, the capital improvement program, which this aquatic center, community center expansion is part of, is, and this is right out of the resolution that's on the agenda tonight. The CIP is a financial planning document. An adoption of the CIP by itself does not obligate or bind the city of Snoqualmie to finance or complete any of the individual capital programs or projects contained in the plan. So unfortunately, this is all lumped together with so many things are attached to this. And I realize this is what you guys are worried about. You're not worried about police, fire, streets, boardwalks, whatever. This is all you guys really, care about at this point in time. But this is a huge commitment to ask the council to make. This is something that I personally would like to see other partners join in, other legislators join in, and help support this, at least, verbally give us some sign of support for this. Instead of making it all fall on the city of Snoqualmie to go in debt, to provide this. So it's a tough one. My initial response when I was running for office was, at that time, I think we still had like $15 million gap we needed to cover. Now we're down to 5. Initially, I was so against that because of putting us into this and my concern about losing other vital programs. I still have concerns, but $5 million does seem much more attainable than previous numbers that we've had.
Councilor Washington?
Yeah, I'll just end with this point that, thank you very much, Councilmember Cotton. Those are all excellent comments. And again, I agree with what you're saying. I think a point was raised that, the cost of the project, if the council decided and, along with the administration to forego this for a matter of months, the price of this project would potentially increase. Okay. Well, that's an opportunity to go back to our partners and have that tough discussion, and also to go back to design build and have that discussion. Is there also potential that we could take the design out to bid? I would add, just a question for clarification. Can we take the design out to bid?
So there is it's a issue we could probably discuss in executive session, but I'll just say that there are laws around starting one type of acquisition process and changing to a different type of procurement process.
Okay.
In the middle.
Thank you. Just
one, you did say that it would potentially be more expensive. One thing that would happen is we would lose our building permit application that we have submitted now under the 2018 code. And we'll have to qualify under the new energy code. So we will have much more expensive and higher energy things to meet on the glazing, on the wall systems, on the roofing systems, and efficiencies on the heating and cooling systems. So the price will increase. I don't know how much. I'm not even going to say the word significant because I don't have that data in front of me right now. I'm just going to tell you it will be more expensive.
Okay. Just as
Somebody in the room that has that data, if you want me to call them up, but I don't have that data.
just as a follow-up to that, it's my understanding, I think I originally said 18 million, and I'm probably double counting there, but let's call it 15 million plus. It's currently being invested. So there's also that aspect to it as well. And just kind of the principle of, well, we have to buy now because if we don't, it's going to be more expensive. That, yeah,
I just wanted to be clear that it would be more expensive. That's what I want to make.
Point
I'm not
taken.
trying to do a sales job.
Point taken, City Administrator. It's just not a justification to do it now, in my mind. I'll leave it there.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
I just want to say, I mean, yes, I made the motion. I'm willing to reconsider at any time on a solution which closes the gap. Again, I am concerned that we proceeded down the path of a full build without consideration for those other options. We agreed to move forward at the time we had discussion on the options to say yes, but those other options remain on the table. And I really do view this as that the administration will take this as let's go do, where the CIP is not necessarily a full let's go do. Hence my motion. But at the minute there's an option which potentially costs less, closes the gap, brings in additional partners, additional funding. I'm all for it. We can have that conversation anytime you want. But we asked you to close the $5 million gap when we went down this path. We haven't closed it. And now you're levying it on council to make a $5 million finance, not funding, but financing option on this, which will have 20-year impact. Okay. So again, I want to make sure they're clear. It's not no, it's just not yet. We got to work the issue. However you do it, in coming with one of the lesser options or coming with partners and funding or something else, I really don't care. I can't approve a project which doesn't have the funding in place.
Councilor Watton.
I have a clarifying question, I guess, and that would be to Mr. Boutte. If we do a $5 million line of credit or 8 million, because in my mind, it could be 8 million. If we decide that we're going to not include the YMCA until that's firm, and we put in 8 million or 7.8, where is the repayment on that loan? Is it coming through tax dollars, recurring tax dollars? Would it be coming through potential REIT, which is a separate fund, a separate source? Because that may help change the conversation.
So it would be coming through REIT, so it would be funded out of your CIP. Part of the challenge, however, is we've estimated what the capital program and debt service sustainability is over time, right, for the most part. And so financially, we've become a little bit more worried unless we're subtracting from other potential projects right along the way in order to cover whatever that debt service looks like. So the $5.2 million line of credit that would roll into a bond would equal roughly $375,000 of revenue from REIT that would be used to repay back that bond over a 20-year period. You're now looking at increasing that up if we don't necessarily have the trust in the other partners coming along for the ride. If it is 7.7, for example, then you're probably looking at $400,000-$500,000 or $550,000 of REIT that you're gonna have to pay back over time. So where are we often allocating those REIT dollars? Typically other debt service. So we have just one small bond, right, that we're still paying off that will be finished 2030. But then we're often using REIT to support our ongoing capital programs. And so financially, it may not necessarily make sense. It made sense in this to get that bond down. 5.2 was reasonable, but if you start increasing that up to 7.5 or so, it may become less reasonable. And it may not fit within our coverage ratios that we're kind of really looking at, right, overall. So I'd have concerns in that front, which means we would have to go back, our budget team, right, to actually rerun those numbers, see if we can actually make it fit. Part of the equation, as I mentioned, we may have to subtract from those capital programs, or if there's other projects in the CIP, we may have to delay those in order to just accommodate this.
Councilor Watton.
Second follow-up question. Total debt today versus total debt historically for the city. Is it higher today or is it lower than it has been historically for the city?
So that may be a homework question.
That may be.
Follow up.
That's a homework question.
non-utilities debt portfolio, really the principal outstanding is $2 million right now. And so we are paying through 2030 right now, $87,000 on a refunded 2021 LTGO bond for the most part. So that has been shrinking over time. We took out a bond in 2011 that paid for the city hall through that bond, which is an important aspect to this. 5 million, I think, is
5 or 8, I can't.
right. So generally what we're asking here is comparable to generally the city hall, I think overall at a lower interest rate likely. But it's kind of hard to tell, I think, at this point. We also had a fire station bond that was paid through a property tax excess levy that finished 2022 as well. So we had those two LTGO bonds outstanding for a good 10-year period during the last decade for the most part.
And those have been paid to zero.
Well, everything except for the 2021 refinance, which was
2 million.
2 million.
$87,000 that we're paying back really through 2030 now at this point.
Thank you.
And what is our bonding capacity?
So our bonding capacity legally is, somewhere around $80 million or so.
No,
Thank you.
it's too much. No.
You're not voting on that.
But
You're saying the pool could be bigger.
there, right? So there's a question of legal capacity versus affordable capacity over there. So the plan that we're proposing or is in front of you is we're looking at the ratios to make sure that we've got sufficient coverage in order to pay back the bond over time. And that's why we presented the plan the way it is currently right now. Now, the question is this the right facility in which to take out a bond? Right, which is what I'm hearing a little bit, right, overall, and I can run kind of down the line a little bit and see interest after different interest after different interest. And so what I'm hearing is council may be looking for more funding partners overall, but there are going to be other questions that are going to come up over time, which is a part of the risk calculation that you're going to have to make. Are those funding partners willing to come along as long as the community center's on the ridge? So they may not be so willing to fund a community center on the ridge, right, overall, at our current, they can't find somewhere a little bit more equitable with wherever they're located, right, for the most part. So there are going to be potentially those further conversations that are going to come along. The city administrator did bring up a very important point is these costs are going to escalate. We do know about the building code, right? And that is certainly some of the worries that we have administratively overall is that are we in the best position right now to actually get this constructed? And so our position is yes, we are. We have to consider, for us, the administration, who's going to be on council, in time for the most part. So, is if we're going to have the same group here, or there are going to be different perspectives. We have had conversations about opportunity costs over time as well. And I think I've heard that discussion point here too. And so in essence, there's a lot of different interests in play, and we'll have to potentially find a way to kind of consolidate those interests. And in some cases, council may have to make some compromises, right, overall, in terms of what your interest is when it comes to these dollars that we're setting aside to this project. I'm curious to know what those answers are, right? Because we've been up here for a good 2 months now, I think at this point, trying to learn more about what your guys' perspectives are, I think overall, hopefully have a good sense of that and can kind of take that away with us. But I really do believe that we do have a fundamentally important opportunity here. We've had everyone here talk about the benefits. A lot of this, what I heard was proximity to the pool itself. We do know that there's a cost associated with this. We keep on referring to it as a gap. That gap would be funded by a bond that we would be paying back over 20 years. So those people that move into the community and even sell their houses and leave the community would be paying that's $375,000 annually to pay back that bond over time. We're hoping to actually get that down. I know hope is not a strategy. We've talked about this. I've been up here actually saying that and kind of preaching that a little bit. And so where do I go from there is the question, right? Is hope a strategy or is it not? So what's the estimated probability that we're going to get this across the line, in 2 years' time for the most part?
What is it?
So that is part of the calculation, right, of your risk. We do have Josh from the YMCA, right? You're available to talk about.
Point of order.
Your point?
This is council debate, I let it go, but staff is starting to get into the debate. this is council debate. I'd rather us get back to the discussion. We need to make a decision.
True, as long as if he wants, if you need to hear more information from him, then he can provide it. Councilor
They're
Patton.
talking, so, yeah.
That's good.
So question, when does what was it, the permit, when does that expire?
Jeff, when do we submit it?
Can we extend it?
Can we?
1 year. And we submitted it when? Like February? March. So March of next year.
And that is the extension, or there's an extension on March of next year?
That would be the limit, would be March of next year on the current submittal. And we'll have to talk to Emily about that extension.
So Councilor Christensen,
If we were to extend it in the CIP to 2025, do we know what the cost implications would be of that delay? Because I assume that then we would be having a less firm number. We wouldn't know how much the equipment would cost. I suspect that some of that would be problematic, especially with trying to make sure that we hit our construction in the dry season and things like that.
So we do have an estimate. We prepare for all eventualities, right, for the most part, that year. With that, and so Janet, would you mind bringing up some materials with you, or Dylan, I believe, could have those materials, I'm not quite sure. But first off, I mean, if I'm permitted to do so, I don't know, it's a risk. Councilmember Johnson brought it up a little bit, but to figure out ways to potentially shrink the size of the bond. We've been trying to take our pencils and see what we could potentially, how to reduce that. We wouldn't complete the entire $5.2 million, right, funding gap, or at least reduce that, but we do have some potential ways to get it down to roughly 3.9 in total for the most part. I'm not sure if council's interested in that 3.9, if that would actually get you across the line or not, on this, but we do have things to share when it comes to that. They're not easy, right, decisions necessarily in that. But then in addition to that, we also have a community center, we called it a scope reduction and delay option, in which we've prepared materials for, and we're happy to propose it. The administration, what I would say, is happy to propose a motion as well. That's very similar to what Councilmember Holloway put on offer as well. So
Yeah, that's all I'm asking. Let's have those conversations. I'm not sure tonight we got time to go into all those discussions you have, but yeah, let's have them. But it's probably other agenda items and coming through committee and coming back to council.
Councilor Christensen,
If possible, I'd at least like to know the dollar amount the delay would cause us, because it's my understanding if we don't move forward in July, that will have an effect going forward. So I'd like to know what the cost is if we end up delaying it. I fully agree that we should have additional conversations as necessary as we go forward, but I just want to know if I'm going to be asked to vote on something, that I know what the financial implications are
Absolutely.
right now.
Good evening, Council. Jana Walker, Budget Manager. We have prepared a couple scenarios. We haven't prepared for that particular one where we just delay until 2025. But you could see an escalation of about 6%. That's what ABSHR has estimated that costs would increase. So if you look at the total amount and multiply it by 6%, then you would have an estimate, a pretty good estimate of what costs might be.
For the benefit of everyone here, could you give us a number that matches with that, so I'm not doing mental math?
I'm going to do math in my head, which I don't love to do, but maybe it would be 1.8 million more.
Yeah.
So by delaying, all right, 1 year, it's 1.8.
Councilor Johnson,
I heard a comment earlier about how some families have to drive to Bellevue and farther, and that's the boat that my family's in for our kids. We couldn't get anything closer, so it is frustrating. So I absolutely hear that, and I'd love to have it here, and I hope that we can find a way. As I said earlier, I think that we might be able to get there. I think that we're coalescing to some degree on something that looks like a plan. Remember that if if this motion passes, delaying for a year to 2026, or if we ended up delaying to 2027 or whatever else, we can always bring it back at any time. Once we approve the CIP, however amended, that doesn't mean that now that is written in stone and can never be changed. If we contact our legislators and we say, hey, here's the actual number, here's the actual design, and they say, we'll work to get it, we're on board. That doesn't mean, of course, that it actually passes the state legislature, but if we could get them to say, yes, we're committed to trying to get this, awesome. Or other sources, great, bring it back and we can try to get this done even sooner. It's just that that we'd be trying to secure that funding first. One other thing I wanted to mention, and actually I'm going to make a motion here as well for a baby dinosaur. No one knows in the audience why I said dinosaur. Everyone up here does. So a line of credit, I think that we would also have to retitle that as I'm going to propose unidentified sources. So move to change line of credit to unidentified sources.
Is that, I don't view that as modifying the motion on the floor. I think it's a separate motion, though. The motion on the floor is to move the community center from 2025 to 2026.
Oh, I was just gonna try to do them at the same time, but if that's out of order, then I'll do it later.
Well, I guess you can add it to say and rename line of
okay.
credit to unidentified. Okay, fine.
Great. The motion is to do that and to change the line of credit to unidentified sources.
I'll second out of curiosity because I'd like to know what are the implications for that then? Are you just striking the idea of going forward? Sorry, I should have left it at that. Sorry. Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councilor Johnson, second by Councilor Christensen to add to the original motion of moving the project to 2026 and add to change line of credit to unidentified sources. Councilor Johnson.
Great. As the maker of the motion, I will clarify. So the reason being that it sounded to me from our conversation, I didn't hear an overwhelming amount of support for a line of credit. So that was my reasoning. Was what it sounded to me like was that a lot of council members wanted to have other sources identified rather than a line of credit. That's my reasoning.
Councilor Benson.
So my question is, so if we push this to the next CIP, how much money continues to be bled for this project? Things that are on the CIP, money gets spent on them. And my concern is that without the funding that we need for the project, the money that we spend on it in the intervening time is lost. We have a big gap, and we don't have a way to fund it without eventually ending up at a bond at this point. And so my question would be, you know, we all agreed to spend $1 million on a design because it was our understanding that we had $1 million in grants to spend on the design. And then that ended up being $400,000 on a grant or $450,000 on a grant. I can't, that's a hit that the city takes, and we're not getting that back. I mean, we can ask Absher, but I think I know what they're going to say. So my concern with pushing this forward to 2026 is how much money do we spend on this in the intervening time? And if it's zero, then that's an easy vote. If it's if we're going to continue to be spending on this, that becomes a harder vote for me.
Point of order, not to interrupt what you're saying, but the motion now is focused on whether we change the verbiage from line of credit to other sources yet to be determined.
We can take that,
but no,
I can
that's
say all that
what-
stuff again
yeah.
if you want.
Well, so anyway, just so that we
Point well
stay on
taken.
track in the current
We need
motion.
to continue on just the discussion of changing the verbiage.
It's okay, I'll say it all again.
Mayor.
City Attorney.
So just one point you should be aware of, the state law, the Growth Management Act, and the required elements. Your capital facilities plan has to include clearly identified sources of funds. So having a TBD is arguably not a clearly identified source of funds. So something to consider.
Counselor Johnson.
If my second will allow me to withdraw,
Yes.
all right, then can I make a different motion?
So the motion is withdrawn. State your motion.
Yeah, same thing, but instead of saying unidentified sources, let's call it grants.
It's been pretty specific.
I don't hear a
Motion
second.
dies for lack of second. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway.
I guess I want to address both. One, the CIP doesn't commit us to the line of credit. We can later on make a council decision how we want to do that. So I think you've got the concern. We can probably deal with that at a later date as part of motion action. To your question, we approved the design contract. There has not been we may have made an amendment, I don't remember, but there hasn't been additional contract, which would be the build phase would come later. Okay, so beyond what we've already committed, unless we, the council, do other actions, there's no other funds committed. Okay, but that may be a question that comes back to you in whenever about a contract extension or whatever, and we'll take that up as it comes. Keep in mind, the CIP is as much a conceptual plan versus a committed plan, okay? It doesn't actually commit the funds, just says this is where we're going, this is our intended plan. Reality will come in and we may or may not make action on elements of the CIP. If the state were to come by and say, here's funding for whatever reason, we have another COVID event and they come back with more money, whatever, we may take it up for action in advance of the CIP. Okay, but again, the CIP is conceptual, doesn't necessarily commit us 100%. So to answer your question, we've already made commitments. There's no other commitments unless we, the council, decide there are.
Counselor Watton.
The current motion is to delay the community expansion a year in the CIP. And that's what's before us. And I do not think that's a good idea of pushing it out because it will increase costs. And keep in mind, we are not committing ourselves. We are simply saying this is the path that we are going to pursue today.
I think that's true, because the next step would be actually to get the guaranteed maximum price. Is that correct? Can you maybe tell us how that works?
If the CIP was approved, the next step would be to develop the contract for the GMP and to proceed with building, and that is a separate council action that will come in the future.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway and then Councilor Washington.
So we can do reconsider at any time. My intention is a clear message because I approved a design contract under a certain funding assumption that changed. I approved a focus on design options, not to the exclusion of other options, that changed. I want to make it clear where we're headed here. I'm willing to reconsider this at any time. I'm not willing to consider to have it as intent of a $5.2 million deficit. So that's why, no, well, you propose keeping it in 2025. We could. Again, the CIP doesn't necessarily commit us to anything. I'm more concerned with, I want the messaging clear. This gap with partners and whatever, or design changes needs to be addressed. And I don't want the community staff running off saying, we got a CIP, we're going. Not until we close that. Not until we find an acceptable solution to minimize that gap. But we can reconsider at any time.
I withdraw, Madam Mayor. I think my point's been made.
Sorry.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, so the motion's on the table to move the project from 2025 to 2026. So we're voting on that. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 All in favor, or all opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, maybe,
Do a show of hands?
yes, please. So all the ayes, please raise your hand.
Ayes.
Johnson,
Well, wait, I'm sorry. Let's back up.
Yeah,
I meaning move it to 2026.
right, that motion.
we're gonna move it to 2026.
You said from 2025 to
Yes,
2026.
I
25
was
to
just confirming.
2026.
Ayes and nays get me confused every now and then. Sorry.
So yes.
To move it
raise
to,
your hand.
move the CIP to 2026
Yes,
for the community expansion. Okay.
from 2025. So Councilor Johnson, Councilor Cotton, Councilor Washington, and Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. Okay, opposed, please raise your hand. Councilor Christensen, Councilor Watton, and Councilor Benson. Right. Then we go on the original motion, which is actually the approval of the CIP. And that's for all the remainder of the projects. Need discussion on that?
It's for the remainder of the projects on the CIP?
Right, so the only adjustment we would make then is moving on the CIP.
Yeah, so we would delay the project 2 years, right? The start of the project would be 26, so you would see that project incorporated in here and probably 26.
Right now it's on there for 2025.
It is, but we're not, so it's not a, for example, you'll see it on there.
Sure, we don't need to debate it. We already made the however,
Well,
we can change that at any time, however. Go ahead.
if I can explain, the project is slated to go 24, 25 for the most part. So really the beginning of the project now becomes 26, which means you're shifting 2024 into this 25 through 2030 window. So we have to incorporate not just the $15 million that you see here for 2025, but you're seeing the full project at its estimated cost for 26 and 27, basically.
So City Administrator Chambliss?
I would request that we have the opportunity to update the paperwork with the latest input from council and bring back a complete document for you to take action on at the next meeting. Because Dylan was just about to let you know, this really changes a lot of things and we need time to prepare that for your full consideration.
So go ahead.
Anyways, Councilor Christensen?
And then so also if we're moving it 2 years, is it instead of adding $1.8 million, we should assume it's basically $4 million or more, which is
It
kind of
gets
the
up
size
there.
of the gap.
It does get up there. I'm not gonna pin us to a number necessarily, but it will.
But so instead of 5.2, it would be 9.2 would be our
Well,
gap.
So part of the challenge, right, is there's a line of credit associated with this. I think we've heard feedback from council overall about potentially not wanting to associate this project with a bond. We have a category on here called grants, appropriations, or other revenue sources in which we then put that back into that total up there for the most part, which hopefully gets through the city attorney's concerns when it comes to some of that language overall. But that is kind of the category that we've kind of outlined here. All that line of credit would go into that total above there. And so we'll have to see exactly what that number kind of looks like overall, what that gap now kind of entails at that point.
Thank you. Councilor Benson?
Actually, I think this delay gives the citizens the opportunity to vote on a bond. This is something that we could put forward as a bond at this point. And then if the citizens support it, then we can pay for it that way. As my big concern was deciding for the citizens that they were going to have a bond. Let them decide themselves. That's what we got to do.
Mayor Pro Tem Holloway?
Move the table, this agenda bill until next council.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Johnson to table the CIP approval until next council meeting. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
All right. Who said nay?
Nay.
Councilmember
Councilor
Wadden.
Okay. All right, so it's fine. We will move on to the next item on the agenda.
Take a 5 minute.
Oh, let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Is it being recorded? Okay. Okay, it's now 9:03 and we're coming back from our break.
No.
Next item is AB 24-076, Water Reclamation Facility, Phase 3 improvements.
Thanks.
I guess you went, Councilor Cotton, would you please read the introduction motion?
Oh, can we put it up on the screen?
My suck too, Councilmember Cotton.
No pages, introduction. Yeah, it's 89. I can blow it up if you want. Haircut?
I've got the hard copy up if you want.
Okay, I got it. Here we go. Introduction. Water reclamation facility, phase 3 improvements will increase sewer treatment capacity, enhance performance, and replace critical components that are nearing the end of their expected service life. Project construction is approximately 50% complete and remains on schedule for completion in early 2025. During the first half of construction, necessary out-of-scope services were identified and are presented in change order 1. Proposed action, move to approve change order 1 with Prospect Construction for additional out-of-scope services during construction and authorize the mayor to sign.
Moved by Councilor Cotton, second by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway for the Water Reclamation Facility 3 improvements, project update and change order number 1. Is there any public comment regarding that item? See anyone? Okay, any discussion? Councilor Benson?
Yeah, is there any way we could take $5.2 million of this amount budgeted to create a water reservoir at Snoqualmie Community
Please,
Park?
please stay focused on this particular agenda, Bill. Andrew Vining, do you want to give an overview? Thank you. Or council, do you have any questions for him?
I think, good evening, Andrew Mining Project Engineer. Councilmember Cotton summed it up pretty well, but this is a change order in the amount of about 1% of the construction costs. Overall, the project is going well, 50% complete. We've constructed a new blower building. We're currently bringing a new oxidation ditch online, and we've installed electrical gear and headworks equipment. Project's about 3 months ahead of schedule, and we are looking for project completion at the beginning of 2025.
Council, do you have any questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? It's unanimous, and the contract change order number 1 is approved. Next item is AB 24-072, the 6-year transportation improvement program for the period 2025 through 2030. Again, Councilor Cotton, would you please read the summary motion?
Excuse me, this agenda bill presents the city's 6-year transportation improvement plan, the TIP, for the period 2025 through 2030. The 6-year plan is updated annually. Following public hearing and council approval, the TIP will be submitted to WSDOT on June 30th, 2024.
Second.
That's not the motion.
Nope, sorry.
You're early.
Eager beaver.
The proposed action, number one was to conduct a public hearing on the 2025 to 2030 6-year transportation improvement plan. And then a move to adopt resolution number 1691, adopting a 6-year transportation improvement program for the period 2025 through 2030. And where do we make a
Second.
motion to?
Second.
So it's
Thank you.
moved by Councilor Cotton and second by Councilor Washington. Any public comment regarding this item?
Is it for both?
Seeing none?
Point of order.
Mayor Pro Tem
Yeah.
Holloway?
So, item number one was inappropriate to list here, but was done earlier in the agenda.
That's right.
Mhm.
So that's not it. The motion we're really going is item number two is the adoption of the 6-year step.
Number 1691 adopted it. Good.
Correct. Right, we already did the public hearing. So you read the
Right,
first one in. Oh, so we need the second one in.
just the second one?
Just
Yes.
Okay, so the
Thank you.
motion, so the action is move to adopt resolution number 1691, adopting a 6-year transportation improvement program for the period 2025 through 2030.
second.
Okay, so Councilor Cotton and second by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. And we did have a public hearing earlier and there were no comments. Councilor Cotton?
Yes, actually from the Parks and Public Work Committee meeting, the CIP manager Gamble has a updated tip edit. So we do need to make a motion to substitute the edited version for this exhibit from what was introduced at the last meeting. So that
No, the motion wasn't made.
I heard you say motion.
motion to substitute.
The motion is substitute. So, and do you have the current one in front of you?
There is we were presented with the edits from 6/4/24, but I think there was even a more updated version. No, that was it. Okay.
Okay. So it's from the original one that was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. So any. So to substitute any, so any.
The
comments
entire
regarding that?
document.
Right. So you can see that other way. Go the other way. Right.
I'm
So,
getting dizzy.
Okay, just to help smooth things along, there's two exhibit items, number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is what was originally shown at the 6/4. There was recommended edits. Those edits have been captured in another document, exhibit 3, which is the same title, but with parentheses, it says with edits from 6/8, 6/4, I think.
Perfect.
Yep.
Got all that.
Thank you, Dylan.
okay, so any discussion regarding the substitution? Yeah, there was a second.
Oh.
Yeah.
That a second?
There was a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mayor
Well,
Pro
you second.
Holloway.
second.
Yeah, Brian. Or
Mayor Pro Tem
Councilmember.
Really early.
Do we even need it since it's in there? Do we even need this motion since that was actually already
Yeah,
provided?
Yes, you do. This is
Well,
different.
then thirded.
Okay, then 30.
Okay, so any,
Discussion.
and this one's been reviewed as well. So any discussion?
Let's go.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? So that motion passes. So any questions or additional discussion regarding the TIP? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? So that the TIP passes.
We have a question, Chair.
Question. The rest of the agenda, are there items for 12, 13, 14? Do those have to be discussed tonight or can we shift those to the next council meeting given the time of nighttime it is?
Yeah, the sun's almost down.
Let me check, I think.
Well, do we have anybody here to talk the EV thing?
Is PSC not, they're not here, okay. So don't have to do the EV until next time. But we do have a utility rate, he is here. So we do need to do that one.
So,
And then seasonal closure concepts, King Street, is that timely?
Considering we got an executive
Yep.
session after this and. other
And
things
another
to
one,
do,
yeah. Can we,
If we can shift them to next council,
What?
it'd be nice.
point of order, point of order.
Yes, state your
So-
point.
Okay, so in order to do that, do we have to make a motion to move those 3 agenda items?
Yes.
Okay,
Right, I'm trying to figure out which ones we could move. First.
well,
So,
I guess I would make a motion to find out from council, is there, do we want to have these discussions tonight? Do we want the presentations tonight? So I would make an order. Make a motion, sorry. Make a motion. Okay. So I would make a motion from council. Do we want to have the presentations 12 through 14 tonight? Can't make it negative.
is that a motion?
So,
Well,
well,
I mean-
to start the debate.
It's-
Move agenda items 12 through 14 to
Next
next.
council meeting.
Second.
Thank you.
So it's been moved by Councilor Washington.
Paid here.
I don't know. He's
I'm
And
sorry.
then-
I'm sorry,
and
Madam Mayor.
second by Councilor Johnson
Yes.
to move items 12, 13, and 14 to the next.
That was hallway.
What?
Give it to one. I don't care. Just
What?
let's go on.
No, no.
That emotion.
He
It was
was
Watton.
filling the words in.
Yeah, I'm just filling the words in. Washington.
Thank you. I'm losing my,
That's
yeah,
okay.
fading
Councilor-
fast.
Councilor Benson,
My only concern would be for number 14, King Street seasonal closure concepts. Depending on which season we're talking about, it could be more pressing or not. If we're talking about summer season, then I feel like we need to hear that tonight. That's the only one I'm concerned about. Is if we're gonna move on this soon, I'd like to hear about it.
Let's
So-
go.
Councilor Johnson,
I agree with that. And unfortunately, I also thought that I heard staff saying that number 12 was important tonight for the utility rate schedule.
right.
Nice.
Finance Director,
So we do have Sergey Tarasov from SCS Group here tonight to present. Probably been on the clock for the past 2 hours for the most part, and so it'd be good to get through this presentation overall because the next council meeting, we're going to start exploring what those potential rate increases look like. And we have a stack scheduled to try to complete it as well as the biennial budget piece. So once we start kind of delaying some of these elements, we're going to get farther and farther into the season. And our goal for adoption really is in October of this year so that we can move forward with a lot of the ERP system work that's going to take place in order to get payroll up and running by January 1 of 2025. So we're on the clock for the most part.
Councilor Washington,
Thank you very much, Drew, for that information. With that being said, I'll withdraw the motion.
But I am
Second
not
has
talking
to-
about EVs.
I'm
is
sorry.
there,
Your second has to.
Oh, who's second?
Yeah,
Second,
I
Justin.
seconded
Okay.
to make another motion.
so you're withdrawing the motion?
Yes,
So-
yes, I'm withdrawing the motion.
And you second that you're withdrawing, okay? So Councilor Johnson,
All right, and then move to delay or push back, whatever the right word is, the Puget Sound Energy EV curbside charging to
Seconded.
the next meeting.
Yeah.
okay, so it's
So-
by Councilor Johnson and second by Councilor Benson to move EV charging to the next meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, so we will go ahead and start with the utility rates schedule. And Finance Director Boutte will introduce our speaker.
Either Dylan or I could take this on, so we could tag team this one as well. So want to welcome Sergey Tarasov from SCS Group tonight. He's going to be giving council a rate setting fundamentals presentation. Approximately about 20 to 30 minutes, just for those that are keeping track of the clock for the most part. And so we want to thank Sergey for coming here. This is really the start of a 2-month conversation on utility rates and what we may want to set them at with your input and your conversation as well for really the next 4-year period. So this would be looking at 25 through 28, I believe. Yeah, in addition to this, we're gonna also incorporate, not at this meeting, but the next one, conversation around the utility CIP. So we've been addressing the non-utilities portion of the CIP. We're now gonna start addressing the utility CIP. As part of that, we'll probably touch on a little bit the operating budget for the utilities too. And so for those playing at home, if you recall the 4 financial buckets, we've been focused on the blue one, which is governmental capital. Now we're gonna be turning our attention to the enterprise, which is really the utilities overall. So thank you, Sergey. Go ahead and take it away, and thanks for coming.
Can I interrupt 1 second? So I think we need to extend it. Councilor Watton?
Yeah, point of order. Thank you, Mayor. At the privilege of the council at 9:30, we have to agree to extend us beyond 10 o'clock. So keeping that in mind, and it's, I appreciate Sergi being on, but if we can condense his comments to until 9:30 so that we can make that.
Why don't, let's just extend it now.
Okay. Okay, I move that we extend beyond 10 o'clock.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilor Watton, second by Councilor Christensen to extend meeting past 10 o'clock. Any discussion?
Before Lewis gets back.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Holloway voted nay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Watton. Okay, Sergey, please go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, council. Can everybody hear me okay? And see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Well, I do appreciate your time, so I will be using my very quick voice today. So do slow me down if I'm going pretty quick. As Drew mentioned, we actually started working on the study earlier in the year after the completion of the fiscal health review. And because there are some new faces in the council since the last study was done, before we dive into some of the results and numbers, which we're planning to do in the next week or so, or two, kind of the next couple of meetings with the council and committees, we wanted to do a quick rate setting fundamentals just to bring up some of the topics that we'll be talking about during those meetings. I'll be moving pretty quick just due to time. So we're going to really fly through the background, just a quick refresher, and talk about the key components that go into the development of these type of studies. We'll also touch upon the GFCs, which are one-time fees imposed on new development. The last time we completed the study was in 2020. At that point, we performed a comprehensive study, just like the one we're doing right now in 2024. And based on the findings, we did identify that we're projecting a deficiency. In order to resolve the deficiency, an average residential customer was forecasted to see a 3.1% annual increase after no rate increase in 21. The council at that time wanted to provide some relief for their customers, for the city customers based on the pandemic that was going on at the time. So an increase was deferred and 3.1% increases were forecasted thereafter. Since then, a lot of changes have happened. We had historical levels of inflation. Capital saw greater inflation levels than that due to supply chain issues. We saw 100 to 400% increases on specific materials related to construction, and growth has not materialized to the levels that we anticipated. In order to give us a little bit of a foot in the door, so to speak, we wanted to do a quick check, a fiscal health kind of review in end of 23. So we did so in November, and we proposed a modified plan for 2024 that would modify that 3.1% adjustment to a slightly higher one of 4 3/4, just to give us a little bit of headroom with all the changes that we saw. So what we'll be talking to you about next time in terms of what does it look like for 25 and thereafter, and some options for your considerations. Today, we're going to be focusing on the concepts behind rate setting, just to give you a high level understanding of what actually goes into this. And this will be hopefully educational and new for the new council members. Now, we usually start these studies with a review of financial policies. They really help us inform the study process itself and set up the roadmap for the discussion. Then we move into 3 analytical steps in the development of the study. Step number 1 just looks at the big picture. How much do we need to bring in to cover our costs? Step number 2 breaks that big picture down into components. So if you think of step 1 as identifying the size of the pie of costs we need to cover, step number 2 will really focus on slicing that pie into pieces and seeing how big those pieces should be by class of service. Finally, step number 3, this is where we will be developing our rates, which are usually made up of fixed and variable type charges. Now, we have to go through these steps sequentially to get from point A, which is formulating the cost, to actually seeing a rate developed and proposed to our customers. So sequential process here. Now, this is all-inclusive process. We like to make sure we incorporate all of the information available, not just finance, not just engineering. We're getting we want to make sure you have the opportunity to provide us with as much direction throughout the process, not just at the end as possible. We're also incorporating anything we hear from customer service administration, any issues that we're hearing from our customers in terms of affordability, rate structure changes, confusion, anything like that. We want to make sure we have that messaging and back and forth throughout the study. Now, starting with the policies, we brought back the 3 policies that we have utilized in the last couple of studies. The first 2 focus on reserves, really making sure that we have enough cash on hand for those unknowns. The first one focusing on operations. Usually we want to see 90 days. A good example why we want to have that is because on water utilities, we might see higher revenues in the summer and the winter, and we might see still similar type of expenses throughout the year. So we want to have the cash on hand for that fluctuation. Also, year to year, you might experience milder years than others, and we just want to have enough money if we don't hit those typical consumption years from our customers. The second reserve target we're looking for is a capital contingency. It's meant to be as an unanticipated reserve for any kind of cost overruns, minor emergencies, but not. This is not meant to be a catastrophic event fund. This is more of a stopgap fund to help, level of a reserve to help us buy us enough time to start accumulating cash for anything that we might need. Now, altogether, a good target for this reserve is about 1% of planned assets, which we are using. Now, with our conversations with financial advisors, the combination of these 2 reserves should meet about 120 to 180 or even more days of cash on hand if we want to have a good favorable rating. Finally, we brought back the debt service coverage ratio. This is more of a requirement from specific loans like revenue bonds. And this is basically there to make sure the credit holders are confident that we can repay them. Usually, if you're going to be going back to the market for borrowing, we want to hit at least the minimum ratio. And the ratio really represents net revenues. Revenues minus expenses need to cover not only the bond payment, but also a cushion of at the minimum 25%. Now, that's the minimum. If we want to get a favorable rating and get a better interest rate, we usually want to target something higher, which we are doing for the study of 1.50. Moving on to that first step of the analysis. Here, just a couple of items, as I mentioned before, is simply put, to keep it very high level. It's a comparison of revenues today to your expenses in the future. Really, what we're trying to do is making sure that we can not only meet our operating costs, debt service capital, those direct expenses, but also put a monetary value to those policies and make sure we can meet that as well into the future to make sure we're sustainable, not just today, not just the budget period, but in a 5-year period, a 20-year period, whatever our time horizon is for the study. Looking at the elements of the study, that we can break it down into 5 key components, putting a monetary value on the policies themselves. We'll be bringing back to you during the next meeting. Looking at the forecasted revenues, always starting at revenues under current rates, never assuming there's going to be an adjustment in place. And then forecasting expenses, which include O&M, capital, as well as any associated debt service. There's a couple of minor considerations I'll run through for revenues and expenses. Here, just keeping in mind, this is everything we're doing during the study, is that when we're forecasting our costs and revenues, we want to avoid using extreme years, any peaks and valleys, and really look at a normalized forecast, especially for revenue generation. We always want to include all revenue sources, any known contributions, any known proceeds or non-rate revenues. It really help out, even though they're not a significant portion of the overall profile. Any little bit will help keeping our rates as affordable as possible. And finally, on the revenue front, we really want to avoid relying on one-time sources such as reserves, because they're there to help us smooth out rate strategies, but not to rely on an annual basis. On expenses, we do like to separate our costs between operating and capital to make sure we're forecasting them appropriately. Operating costs are typically consistent, increasing with inflation versus capital. They're a little bit more peaky and can vary year to year. And the capital also comes with a little bit more flexibility depending on how critical the capital is, to give us more flexibility on developing scenarios. If some of the projects are not critical, we can move around. We also need to keep in mind of our future additions. Again, even though we're starting with 2024 budget as a baseline, we know that looking out in the future, we're building treatment plants, we're upsizing our systems, and we might need some additional future either programmatic enhancements or new staff needs that need to be incorporated. So that's something we really need to incorporate, and if we're deficient, plan for in the study, because we don't want to be blindsided next time the study is updated and showing that we're deficient because we had to hire staff we didn't anticipate. On the capital front, the big question will be, how do we actually fund it? There's really three schools of thought for funding: cash financing primarily, kind of a pay-as-you-go approach. Usually this comes with the highest upfront increase, but a lower overall strategy in the long term. I mean, that could be 20-year horizon, because you're avoiding the interest from debt. Now, this puts a lot more pressure on existing customers, and if you have capacity enhancing projects that are there for future customers, you're basically making current customers pay for future customers to connect. The flip side is high debt financing, trying to leverage debt as much as possible. Now, the cons with this is that it will cost you more in the end, because you do have to pay for interest, but it does come with more flexibility. Usually you can smooth out your rate increases on the front end, giving you a little bit more alternatives for front end affordability. It also helps you spread the cost of the asset with the life of the asset, and provide you with a little bit more of that intergenerational equity. But you do have to be careful with the amount and quantity of the debt that you issue. And finally, you can look at a hybrid approach where you look at replacing the system, kind of R&R projects from rates, and capacity enhancing projects associated with new tanks or new treatment plants through the utilization of debt service. Once we have all our elements together, we do perform multiple sufficiency tests. We want to make sure that we can not only meet our cash obligations, but also any coverage and any other metrics that we want to meet to comply with our policies. And the greater of the two deficiencies will be the driver of the rate strategy. Once we complete the revenue requirement, we move on to cost of service, again, which tries to answer the question if cost differences exist to provide service to different customer classes. Now, the city has done a great job looking at cost of service over the last two rate studies, going back to 2016, 2020, and looking at interclass cost allocation. Some differences have been started to progress or being phased in from those studies, and we'll definitely be looking at how much progress we have made and how much more progress that we need to make. In general, we do use industry practices to develop these type of studies, but we do use utility-specific information for the actual study itself. The classes that we'll be evaluating are highlighted on these slides. We'll be looking at residential, multifamily, commercial, and irrigation classes. This is potable irrigation for the water utility. And on the sewer utility, we're looking at residential, multifamily, and commercial, which we split into low strength commercial, kind of domestic level, and then high strength commercial type customers, and seeing how these accounts have been doing in terms of progressing towards their rates.
Mayor,
Councilor Johnson?
good question.
Uh-huh.
Was that all the irrigation is potable according to this?
No, there's also reuse irrigation, but the water utility currently is focusing on the potable irrigation. The reuse irrigation will be assessed separately. Okay. Is there another question?
No, it was very similar. Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. In order to perform the cost of service analysis, we'll be going through a multi-step process as well. Again, we'll be highlighting some of the key items during the next couple of meetings with you, but just to give you some background, and really how you perform it is you look at grouping your expenses into different categories. We call them functions of service or classifications of service. Here on the table, you see the highlights. They're basically forms of variable and fixed type costs. We'll get into a little bit more details during the next meeting what these actually mean, but due to time, I'll keep it brief. Next, we develop allocation factors using historical and forecast statistics, and then using those allocation factors, we spread these costs to our customer classes. So it's again a multi-step process utilizing financial and billing and usage information to perform the analysis. Over the last several studies, we did utilize a phase-in approach to get our customer classes towards cost of service. And our initial focus will be to utilize what we learned from prior council discussions to present the initial findings. The last step of the overall kind of ongoing monthly rate process is the rate design itself. The number one priority from somebody who's developing these rates is to make sure that the rates we develop collect the appropriate dollars that we identified in the first two steps. After that, we want to make sure we're passing along any cost signals that the utility is facing to our customers, but also we're also developing rates that meet the goals and objectives of the utility. Sometimes we might not be able to achieve everything, as an example, conservation or low-income support rates, because typically those type of rates are not cost-based. So we'd really have to have that good conversation about what's really the priority of the city, of the community, and what is the best rate structure that will conform to those priorities, because the biggest item that we really need to identify is that there's not a one size fits all solution. One rate structure will not resolve all issues. If we're trying to target revenue related goals, we might focus on revenue sufficiency and look at enhancing our fixed charges. If we're looking at cost related goals, we might look at conservation and use efficiency. We might actually do the opposite, reduce or maintain fixed charges and enhance our volume rate charges. If we're looking at practicality, we might want to keep our rates as simple as possible to avoid confusion, so we can really convey the pricing signal. And depending on what's important, a different type of structure might be more applicable than a different one. Finally, the last item before we wrap up the rate portion of the discussion is just a summary of your rates. Here you see all three utilities summarized on one slide. The table to the left summarizes the water utility. There's fixed charges that vary by meter size and by class of service. We also have volume rates at the bottom. The residential rate is a block rate, meaning that the rate per unit of water increases as consumption increases. So once we exceed a certain threshold, in this example, block 1 is 0.300 cubic feet or 3 CCF. Once a CCF is 100 cubic feet, we start paying more for any additional usage and so on. Multifamily through irrigation rates are uniform. Now, typically, we would utilize a conservation structure such as this for residential customers because the typical customer, there's not a lot of variability between a typical residential customer versus other classes of service. There's a lot more variability, not necessarily from this discretionary use, just due to the size differences between different businesses and so on. In the middle, we'll see the sewer rates. Majority of the rates in our sewer utility are fixed, except for the commercial rates, which are based on a fixed charge and a volume rate that varies by 100 cubic feet or CCF. Once we exceed 600 or 6 CCF, kind of included allowance in our charges. And finally, the stormwater rates are assessed on an equivalent residential or service unit basis, which is 2,600 square feet of impervious surface area. Everybody's assessed the same charge. Residential homes are usually one, or single family homes are one ESU. Non-residential, non-single family homes are a multiple of ESUs depending on their individual square footage of their building and or their account. To wrap things up, we did want to show you a quick survey of the of the state of the current rates and how do they compare to our neighboring utilities. The city of Snoqualmie's existing rates for a typical consumption of 700 cubic feet, which represents an average residential customer, is summarized in the middle under Snoqualmie 2024. You'll see you're right in the middle of the comparison of the utilities here. Now, a lot of these utilities are going through similar studies, and the 2025 rates will change for a lot of these communities and potentially for the city of Snoqualmie as well, depending on the findings of the study and depending on the council preferences. And then finally, to finish things up, we want to switch gears and talk about general facility charges, which really are one-time fees imposed on new development as a condition of service or certain upsizing redevelopment. So if a customer wants to upsize from a 5/8 inch meter to a 2-inch or 3-inch meter, that incremental additional capacity they should be paying for. Now, in terms of legal authority, RCW or Revised Code of Washington 3592/025 provides the cities and towns authority to impose these fees and does provide some guidance in terms of how to impose these fees or what they're based on. Really, the RCW indicates that these fees should be based on the cost of the system, meaning capital infrastructure investment that's in the ground today and necessary to allow growth to occur in the future. And that means that any revenues collected from these charges can only be used for capital and cannot be used for operating. They can also be used for debt service, but again, not operating purposes. The RCW also indicates that the charges should be imposed on a proportional share basis, meaning that proportionally based on capacity. So they have to be the same for all meter sizes or equivalent residential units, and customers can have multiple units of capacity, but there needs to be one measure of capacity and charge per that unit of capacity. So to give you a quick summary, your water connection charges scale with meter size, starting with a 3/4 inch meter at $12,000 or so. The sewer rates are based on an equivalency basis. Single family homes are 1 ERU, which is equivalent residential unit. Non-single family homes will be assessed on 138 or 39 gallons per ERU basis. So they may be paying a multiple of these charges depending on how big the business is and their projected demand needs that they have. And then finally, stormwater GFCs are assessed on a per equivalent service unit basis, which is 2,600 square feet over impervious service area, which is about $3,200. So that kind of gives us the super lightning speed overview of rate setting process. Just wanted to plant some seeds in your mind because we will be bringing back some initial findings that we're finalizing in the next week or two. So again, depending on the schedule that we have available, we'll be planning to bring some preliminary numbers for the first step, the revenue requirement. Then pretty quickly thereafter, we're going to be having several meetings to discuss feedback from you, as well as the next steps, the cost of service and rate design towards the end of July or so, depending on the timing and the feedback that we receive, with the goal to wrap things up towards the August time period for that January implementation. I know we're moving pretty quick, so hopefully we'll have some good discussion in the next couple of meetings. And that's what I have for you. Any questions?
Councilor, do you have any questions? Do you want to think about it?
At this point.
Okay, save it for next time. Okay, thank you, Sergey, for the overview.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so moving on to King Street seasonal closure concepts. I think Dylan Gamble will be reviewing it.
I am here to kind of go full circle on this conversation that we had at a previous council meeting discussing the seasonal closure of the King Street between Maple and Highway 202. Let me screen share. This is a quick flyer I made to share with the committee on this discussion. So the feedback was at the previous meeting to pursue looking into this, and I stated that I would bring back the proposed bill of materials, so to speak, on how to achieve that based on the feedback I received at that council meeting. This is the proposed solution here, and I know that you're all pretty far, and I'll explain, but essentially the lane of traffic flowing into King Street, if you're on 202, you'd obviously be driving on the right side of the road, so you'd merge on the right. We're proposing to put 4 approximate large concrete bollards on each of those. So on Maple, you'd be turning onto King Street. Same thing, we'd be blocking those with those concrete bollards. Behind it is a security fencing. I think it looks like a gate, but it is just fencing. You can link as many of these up. You've probably seen them at special events. They get weighted down. And the reason we would put these behind the concrete bollards is so that we could hang our road closed signs in between the concrete bollards that will be placed blocking that lane of traffic. The keys to distinguish between these two locations is that on King, we're proposing using that security fencing across the entire way so that people do not just drive around the blocked section of the road while it's being closed. And for the other side on Maple Avenue, which sees far less throughput or access, we're proposing to just block that one lane of traffic so that emergency vehicles can still get in there, and the proposed food vendors could also utilize that access point. Right now, the theory is to have 4 approximate food trucks that would be attached to that special event permit that would go through for this closure. That is the quick of it. There's one consideration that we had that's different from this, where you see road closed. We were thinking about having it road closed to through traffic. So we would still obviously allow access to the Woodman or to Smoky Joe's or to the Northwest Railway Museum, so that they could have access into this alley to either provide handicap wheelchair access or unloading or loading services. That is the general proposal. Let me make sure I scroll up here. And we also would want to put a no right turn temporarily, especially when this first goes out. We foresee that there's going to be some distinct confusion when this happens. So more signage in that temporary vein out further away to warn people is going to be part of it. And we will probably scale that up and down if we have a lot of chaos. If we have lots of chaos, then I imagine we will probably be reactive and be implementing more signage. If it's just thoroughly understood and everyone thinks that ugly signage should just go away, then we will probably react that way as well. That is the complete package. There is, if you'd like me to move forward, we can begin to purchase these items. This does not exceed the spending authority for Public Works Director, and so we can move forward if you agree, or I'll just leave it there if you agree, I suppose.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, you said that the boulders were concrete,
Yes.
so it would be difficult for someone to just jump out of their car and start moving them around.
Yeah.
I like that. And in terms of on the maple side, having that opening does leave open the possibility people doing shenanigans. So would there be, say, like a sandwich board that would be there with the directions of who is supposed to be in? Is that kind of the idea?
Happy to take suggestions, but right now we're going to use the security fencing to just say no throughput traffic and see if that causes conflicts, but we definitely can escalate and de-escalate. We
Okay,
could
that makes
also
sense.
consider just blocking it and not putting any bollards or anything. And as food vendors or anything like that comes in, we would have to move it. Obviously, if a fire truck had to get through there, they would very swiftly move it.
Counselor Christensen and then Counselor One.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know that this is being put forward in conjunction with conversations with the downtown merchants and whatnot. Have we had distinct conversations with the businesses that are directly affected on that street as well?
We have yes and no. So there's multiple business owners that would be impacted in theory. Northwest Railway Museum's executive director, we work with him pretty thoroughly to discuss any concerns. And then we have not reached out to the other two primary businesses, the Woodman, which is not open, nor that I understand is planned to be, or Smoke.
Okay.
But Smoke just as of a parking lot independent of street parking, I should clarify.
Yeah, so I would encourage folks at the city to make sure that the businesses are aware and see what, if any, reactions there are. And then I think that in Parks and Public Works, you talked about the ability potentially to put some flowers or to otherwise make the bollards, well, I realize we're going for visibility. But to make it look a little bit less like a pencil eraser. Obviously we want them to be visible, but if we can make them look visible and beautiful, I think that our residents would probably appreciate that.
It looks more orange in the picture.
They do have several colors.
Oh, okay.
That's just the only color that they have a photo of.
Counselor Watton.
Yeah, thank you. Couple comments. First of all, the downtown merchants are aware of this and they are supportive of it. We have not heard any pushback on that. Secondly, the ballard, in my mind, would be high-vis yellow for whatever it's worth. These look different than what I had envisioned. I envisioned those like post light that this looks like something that I'd sit on. But maybe I'm misinterpreted. Maybe it's much bigger. But the other thing too with it was the idea that you put them in the ground and then you can remove them if you needed to, because we weren't sure if this is going to be a permanent thing or a test.
And I can explain why we propose this one. To put the bollards that you're talking about in, we would have to cut the asphalt and add concrete. They can't be mounted into the asphalt that is currently there on both street sections. And so in order to do a permanent bollard that's removable or otherwise, we would have to cut big wide strips and replace with concrete. That would definitely escalate the cost of this.
Okay.
Not because of the bollard itself, but the concrete would be extensive for that, much more than the standalone concrete bollards that we're proposing here. And they're about 2 feet high, weigh about 640 pounds each.
Well, they can't be moved easily.
With a forklift, we'll place them, but a car would not move them easily.
Don't sit on one of those. You'll bounce off on a little mushroom.
Counselor
web.
Johnson.
I would just encourage the bollards to look however it is that professionals in the industry say is safe.
Counselor Christensen.
In that same vein, is 2 feet tall big enough to provide visibility to drivers that may not be expecting that?
That's what the fencing is
Fencing
intended to
behind
be
it,
behind it
okay.
for, right behind it,
Okay.
and to block pedestrians from, accessing, standing right in the road.
Okay.
The fencing is currently proposed as black, but they sell yellow fencing. So all those kind of considerations, could.
Counselor Washington.
Yeah, just for the fencing to secure it so that it's not moved. Do you have an idea or plan on that or?
We're just gonna use weights, sandbags, I don't know if you can see in the picture, but they have like flat panels, flat bar,
Okay,
and they get weighted down temporarily.
with sandbags,
Sandbags.
and those are pretty heavy, so.
They definitely can be moved, but it will take time.
Some
That's
effort.
the reason for.
So that we can
it's supposed to
remove
be-
them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Counselor Jones?
Curious, what does staff need from council to get yeah, let's do this? What, if anything?
Thumbs up? Or motion?
I could have already gone for it, I believe, based on previous council feedback, but I told you that I would come back with a proposal as shown, and so I wanted to make sure I did that first off, and then second, if you had any glaring concerns or heck no, this is not what you said at all, then I would also back off then too. But going forward, I'll pursue this as best I can.
This looks great, Dylan.
Looks good. Thank you. Essentially without objection,
No objections?
Yeah.
It's like the.
Go forward.
make it so.
All right, thank you. Okay, so next item, we have an executive session. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I, litigation that has been specifically threatened to which agency, the governing body, or member acting on in an official capacity or is likely to become a party, litigation that the agency reasonably believes may be commenced by or against the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in official capacity, or litigation or legal risks of a proposed action or current practice that the agency has identified when public discussion of litigation or legal risks is likely to result in adverse legal or financial consequence of the agency lasting approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And those staying for the executive session would include our city attorney, David Linehan, and city administrator, Mike Chambliss. And then we will actually come back because we have the 2 agenda bills in that we will deal with as part of the executive session. So it is now, say 9:50. So we we will actually have it here. So everyone else can be excused, but we would need Andy back and our city clerk back. So. Okay, we will come back. Okay, sorry. So we're coming back from executive session at 10:18. We are moving on to AB 24-073 authorization for continued legal services with K&L Gates. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, will you please read the introduction and motion?
City entered engagement letter with K&L Gates on January 6, 2023 for legal services related to fee to trust, fee to service, and other legal matters. The city has exceeded the $50,000 spending threshold and seeks council approval for an additional $80,000 for continued legal representation. Move to approve the additional $80,000 for continued legal representation with K&L Gates. May I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Christensen. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? So it's unanimous, that passes. Next item is AB 24-080, amendment number 2 to the agreement for legal services with Ogden Murphy Wallace PLLC. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, would you please read the motion, introduction and motion?
City entered an agreement with Ogden Murphy Wallace PLLC OMW on December 1, 2022 for representation of the city in the appeal matter of CA Carey versus City of Snoqualmie with compensation not to exceed $50,000. Amendment number 1 was executed on October 23, 2023, increasing the amount by an additional $75,000, bringing the not to exceed amount to $75,000 for OMW's work on this matter. Billing for services rendered in connection with the appeal has reached $79,000, and an amendment is necessary to increase the compensation amount to complete the special process. Move to approve amendment number 2 to the agreement for legal services for Ogden Murphy Wallace PLLC and to authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, second by Councilor Christensen. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It's unanimously passed. Council, I would suggest we forego our mayor's report and liaison reports unless there's something urgent. Other than we do have some in Snoqualmie that was trying out for the 1,500 meter Olympic trials today. So
Oh, wow.
go home and watch it. So Joe Wascom. So
Wow.
pretty
That's
cool. So we'll find out how he did. Oh, wait a minute.
Seven.
Does that mean?
Do we have
anything?
We can do 1,500
He was
meters
seventh.
off of the cliff.
Seventh, oh.
So
It's pretty impressive.
with that,
Move
no
to
further
adjourn.
business. Okay,
To adjourn. Second.
Mayor Pro Tim Holloway and second by Councilor Washington.
Yes.
So we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.